Exclusive from notjustok.com.
Ladies, MCI, yo, yo, hola, he's yours, hola, yours, hola, he's yours, hola, yours, hola, he's yours, hola, yours, hola, he's yours.
Sawa, twende.
Yo, mambo vipi mpenzi mtazamaji, karibu kabisa kwenye show nzito ya nguvu. Welcome to Jan of Africa. Au sio, ni show ambayo inazungumzia music Africa, what we do in Africa. Understand nini kile kinapatikana Africa. And today it's on Sunday, niko maeneo ya theater kama nilivyokuambia kwamba nitakuwa hii maeneo na niko na msanii wa nguvu nenda kumfanyia show. Au sio? So siwezi kwambia ni nani, lazima tufike hapo kwanza mimi na wewe tucheke alafu tujue ni nani. Au sio? But follow the leader. Au sio? Yeah. Bwana, tushafika maeneo ya theater na mtu tulikuwa tunakuja kumtafuta yuko hapa ndani ya nyumba, au sio? Si mwingine utaweza kumuona. So show yetu leo tumeweza kubahatika kufanya show na msanii anaitwa MC. Bwana, mambo vipi MC? Inakuaje?
Fresh kabisa.
Tuambie nini mazuri mtu wangu?
Mazuri ni wasanii wanazidi come through kufanya mambo.
Okay.
Unaweza kukamilisha muziki.
So niambie mambo vipi?
Mambo fresh.
Tuambie ni nini hasa, kwa sababu wale watu wa pale wajue ni nani, kwa mimi mwenyewe najua wewe ni nani. Understand, mimi najua MC, but ningependa kwanza uanze kujitambulisha, unaitwa nani, unafanya nini, au sio, na kwa nini uko katika hii show kubwa, si nyingine, show wazito, the Jan of Africa, au sio? We are talking about our music, au sio? Tuambie unaitwa nani?
Kama MC ufunuzi ambaye anawapenda sana, anawafeel sana.
Bwana, tuache kwa kwamba unakufeel sana. Kwa nini? MC ni nani? Unafanya kazi gani? Wewe ni msanii, wewe ni actor, wewe ni comedian, wewe ni nani? Understand, ama wewe ni hoka? Au sio?
MC ni rapper. MC ni yule msanii kama chini medali. MC ni na kweli.
Unajua show yetu inaitwa Welcome to the Jan of Africa, au sio? Unaweza nipatia freestyle kiasi hiyo show, kwa sababu nituambia yeye wewe ni MC, wewe ni hip hop
ati inakamba.
The Jan of Africa, the Jan of Africa.
Kweli yes. Ni hao vijana wa Afrika tunatetea. Tunafika mfuka kama
Inatosha. So MC, tuambie asili yako ni gani, majina yako real, understand? Majina yako real, asili yako ni wewe mzaliwa wapi?
Jina yangu kamili ni Dominic Binaiza. Zaliwa Nairobi mimi.
Unaongea na kamera au unaongea na mimi? Unaongea na wale watu. Bwana okay.
Kama
cut kwanza ilikuwa bwana, mambo vipi mpenzi mtazamaji? Welcome kwa show kubwa, show nzito, show ya vigogo, the Jan of Africa. We are talking about the music, the sound inapatikana Africa, the real sound, the channel na the fake sound, au sio? Na leo kama ilivyo ada niko maeneo ya theater na niko the big band right here, unaona msana piga hii, tuko na teacher, tuko na MC, au sio? Tuko na Commander Jemo. We are talking about the music, au sio? Sina maneno mengi. Watch the show. Yo. Sometimes kwenye maisha kuna kupanda na kushuka. Ukiwa una moyo utaumia. Bwana, mambo vipi mpenzi mtazamaji? Karibu katika show nguvu, show ya wazito, show iliyojawa na nguvu, usio the Jan of Africa. We are talking about the music, the sound of Africa. Watu wengi wamezoea kuona tu vile muziki kwa TV inafanywa, but leo mimi niko na wasanii. Yaani wasanii wako na vipaji tofauti. Kuna yule rapper, kuna yule anaimba, kuna yule anapiga nini. Wamekusanyika pamoja kama wakufanya kitu kimoja. That's the sound. The sound inatoka Africa. So tunaenda kuangalia nini wanafanya, au sio? Na from there tutajuana zaidi, au sio? Welcome and follow the leader. Basi lipo ada, au sio? Tumefika kwenye mwanzo na kwenye headline, ile kitu imetufanya kuwa hapa. Niko Nairobi, si pengine theater opposite na KBC, na niko na wasanii wakubwa hapa, kuna rapa kama vile unaweza kumuona, lakini mimi siwezi ongea sana kwa sababu vitu zenyewe ziko, wanasema usiandikie mate na kuna wino, au sio? Kama tuweze kujuana zaidi, au sio? Saa zingine usichoke kutafuta, kuna milima na mabonde. Mama, give thanks to the Almighty. Mungu wanamwita God, Waarabu wanamwita Allah, sisi tunamwita Mungu na Waluya wanamwita Yesaya. Yo, mpenzi mtazamaji, welcome to the Jan of Africa. This is the sound, there is sound from Africa. Nikizo be right here, niko na MC Sana, niko na teacher pale, na niko na JMO. Tuko ndani ya music, au sio? Today's the day, wale walikuwa nasubiria. Tuko na msanii, unaweza kutukia freestyle mtu wangu.
Je, ni MC kama kawa, si unajua tunaangukanga miaka ya wezi kama neti tunasaka independent kwa hooks in a plenty place. Hawezi pata hata chenye another youth men I'm dead, so saka mwanya upenye panda juu kuongeza tara na teke siku kurubuko head usingoja mamlaka ijilete zameka full entry after chapter na sentence and rules and event slave master mwenyewe kwa shamba na jembe under truth bila kujitawala na presence street in the slavery.
Muda mwingine maisha yanaweza kuwa so stressful, lakini usikatai, tafuta, utazipata. Yupo yule anatoa wananitakizo bini kwa kwenye beat, ninangusha freestyle gani kama kamilea. Napenda nachokifanya
ya nini lakini end up kama mtumwa wa kuzini. Umani sisi umati chafu umefungwa na ibilisi. Uradini watu kukutuka kili ndo kutoa mza huko Misri nafsisi usafisi kuzuma wiki na ugali ama kurunda mwili na tabu.
Action.
Okay, kabisa ni MC Kapa nikianza kubonga. Enzi nilianza muziki nikiwa mdogo sana, ambapo nilikuwa nafikiri muziki.
So mpaka hapo umefika, ni challenge gani umepitia ama ni nini hasa imekufanya mpaka ikakupa moyo? Kwa sababu muziki si kazi rahisi, muziki ni ngumu, kwa sababu kuna msanii tu mmoja anapotea. So nataka kujua ni challenges ngapi wewe kama msanii umepitia, au sio mpaka hapo umefika hapa uko saizi?
Kweli challenge zenye msanii upitia kama kawa ni studio, unapata jo msanii ana ile cash, unajua ana material na vitu na dai drop ya mtaa say watana ile cheda ile dough kudumu muziki.
Ni kina nani hasa ambao unaweza sema katika wamefanyia sana, wamechangia sana mchango mkubwa kufanya ukakuwa wewe MC unajua today? So ni kina nani unaweza sema na ni nini hasa wamefanyia mpaka
kama kao uko fulani mau big up?
Yes, kwa fulani
zaka manijenga mazee hipo gani ile yani kabla ni muziki na sikia
asante sana kwa kuja katika show yetu Jan of Africa. Na expect tutaona kazi nyingi zaidi ya hiyo, umeona, kwa sababu mimi mpaka sasa hivi nimeona kazi zako mbili. So I hope in the next maybe in the fly, kwa sasa hivi umetoka ku launch hizo mbili, utaona bado kazi zako nyingine. Au sio? Kweli waambie mafans wako nini expect from you.
Tarajieni more and more mazee kutoka kwa boy wenu MC pamoja wazee.
Safi sana mpenzi mtazamaji, ilikuwa ni Jan of Africa na leo ndani ya studio tunatembea kwenye theater na ngokutana na MC Sana usio. Kama kawaida, thanks to the director Eddie. I wish ningeshika kamera nikushoot. Tuko pamoja. Yeah, awuza. Lele yo. got the beaches on me, lakini kitu kimoja, sina imani, sina hata furaha nyumbani kwangu mimi. Bibi huyo kanipiga kwa shingo, mziki huu unanifanya na go crazy. Demo akipiga yopa, barirararira, barila, baririririra. Ukikita tamani kucheza mama. Welcome to the Jan of Africa. Oh, unapata sauti za kweli, unapata mziki wa kweli, unapata sauti za kweli. The Jan of Africa, the Jan of Africa, Africa. Yeah. Welcome to the Jan of Africa. Thank you, Sana. To my band right here. J-Mo. This is how we do it every day. Sa.
This is Bill Ryan from Project Avalon, and the date is 16th of February 2010. And this is a bit of an unusual video presentation here, because I'm taking the step of making a video as an interpretation and as a commentary on an audio interview, which we did with an important witness who came and reported his story to Project Camelot a little while ago, about a couple of weeks ago. And as with many of our witnesses, this person wanted to remain anonymous, but he has agreed that we transcribe the audio, and so we've got this as a transcript. And this is going to be released at the same time as the video, because it's important to be able to read the transcript at the same time as you're considering what I'm saying about it here. And as we come into the story, you're going to understand exactly why it's important to get all the information to hold it all into a very fine balance. Now, this is a British person, and he worked in the British military for a number of years. And after he retired from the military, he worked in the City of London, in a very senior position, a respected position, in the City of London. And for those people watching this video who don't know about the City of London, the City of London is like an enclave. It's like a financial enclave in the heart of London itself. Some people consider it almost a little bit like the Vatican. It's very old, it's very ancient. It's the heart of the financial system, not only of Britain, but possibly the world. Many researchers consider that it's very likely that the City of London calls shots on the financial systems in America. They've got control over the Federal Reserve, the Bank for International Settlements, a whole bunch of things that happen. It's like the nerve centre of the financial world. And it's very Masonic, it's very ancient, it's very traditional. And our source attended a number of meetings with senior Masons. And while many of these were interesting, they were routine by City of London standards. They were discussing financial affairs and so on and so forth. And then in June 2005, he attended another meeting that he thought was going to be a routine meeting, but actually this was something rather unusual, and he realized it was unusual as soon as he arrived. In fact, in his interview with us, the one which we have the transcript of, you will see that he says that he felt it was an accident that he was there. He shouldn't really have been there, he didn't know what was happening. And as such, he didn't really participate in the meeting. He was there as a little bit as a fly on the wall. He was just listening to what was happening. And at first he didn't even understand what was being discussed. Now, the people there were Masons, they were senior Masons. They were about 25 or 30 people there, including senior politicians who most people in the UK would recognise by name. I do not know who they were. He didn't name them, and I didn't ask them, but he said these are well-known names. The chief of police was there, representatives from the church, representatives from the military, 25 or 30 people. And as he listened to this story being discussed, it was an informal meeting, it wasn't like a big table with kind of notepads and water glasses and minutes and an agenda and chairman. There were just people in a room who were talking about all of this stuff. And what they were talking about was a plan that had clearly been made a long time ago. And what they were discussing was they were discussing the implementation of this plan. They were discussing how things were going, whether they were on track or not. And what, for example, to give a flavour of this, they were discussing between them some of the problems that they had in the implementation of their plan. And as this little presentation continues here, you'll realise what the plan was. And I'm going to be revealing this in very much the same way as it was revealed to our witness and as he revealed it to me, bit by bit, step by step. The first thing that he heard was they were talking about the fact that Israel didn't look as if it was getting prepared to attack Iran anytime soon. This was a problem. Even back in June 2005, they were apparently concerned that what it was that was planned on some kind of timeline wasn't rolling out according to schedule, and this was an issue for them. So that attracted his attention very quickly, because he'd never been in a meeting when this kind of thing was discussed. Then they were talking about China, and how powerful China was getting, both militarily and financially, very quickly, and that the Japanese weren't doing what they were supposed to do, which was to interfere in some way with the Chinese financial system. They weren't doing that, and this was another problem because China was getting too strong too quickly. Other things that were discussed were, for example, the coming financial crash, the centralization of resources, everything that we saw starting to happen in October 2008. They were planning that and referring to it in their meeting in June 2005. So there was clearly a rollout of some plan here, and he was quite shocked the more that he heard, and when he really realized what was happening, he was extremely shocked. And one of the reasons why I'm giving this video presentation now is to soften the blow and interpret this a little tiny bit, because it is shocking information. And what I also wanted to do is I want to try and differentiate out between what it was that he reported, because he'd heard it with his own ears, and what it is that is his speculation and my speculation about how all this fits together. It's very important information. You need to know this stuff. Even though it doesn't look like it's going to be on track, I don't think this will happen. I think that there are a bunch of crazy people there who are extremely determined to do something, and they were in a hurry, and this is important to understand, they were in a rush, to try and roll out the sequence of events. Now, what he described is what the sequence of events was. It starts with Israel attacking Iran. Now, this hasn't happened yet. There have been a number of indications that there are forces which are trying to push this into happening. You've only got to follow the news for the last 2 years to realise that the public is being prepared for a justification for this kind of thing. Iran is being set up as being the bad guys that deserve something to happen to them, and so on and so forth. Now, that's going to be the start of what is like the opening gambit in a big chess game. And the plan is to provoke Iran or China to retaliate. And our guy, our source, who is a military man, is privately as convinced as he can be, although this has never been made public and this is not publicly known, that Iran does have nuclear weapons. He believes that they have been provided by China behind the scenes. And all of this is intended because it's all right with these controlling forces that Iran has nuclear weapons, because they want them to be used. The plan is for either Iran or for China to retaliate after Iran is struck with a nuclear weapon. At that point, there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, followed by a ceasefire. He heard this being planned in this meeting. This is being choreographed. It's like the script for a movie. This is exactly what's intended to happen. And during this time, the other thing that's being set up for this, and many people watching this will be aware that this is being set up in the background. We've had a lot of information about this from a number of good researchers from many countries who are reporting this on the internet, that things are being set up in many of the Western countries for there to be heavy controls over populations, martial law, increased powers on security forces who are not just the army or the police, but in Britain, for example, our source said that he absolutely knew personally for a fact that a very large number of private security people, their powers were being increased to give them the ability to arrest people, the ability to detain, the ability to handle riots in streets. And here we're talking about just regular people working in private security, people who give the parking tickets on the streets. Their powers are being increased in the same way. And last year we heard President Obama talking about how he wanted to have a sort of national guard at home in America ready to handle this kind of thing. There are a lot of indicators that this is being set up. And in this rollout of this crazy scenario, where it is intended that there will be a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East, the idea is that as the world looks upon this with horror, then they will demand from their governments that there are heavy controls over travel, over communication, over people who meet, over people who protest in the streets. They want to make sure that they don't have crazy bombers on airplanes, crazy bombers in the shopping malls. They want to make sure, and because people will be driven into fear by this, they'll request and demand and insist on heavy controls from their governments, which will be justified. And this is where you're going to kind of get the martial law situation in all the Western countries. It's intended as a justification. All of this is just the start of something, because this story gets much bigger, and it's pretty horrifying. And if watching this now you're feeling a little bit shocked, this is how I was feeling when I heard this information, and this is how our source was feeling when he was hearing this information in this meeting. This is just the beginning. Now, during the time of the ceasefire, everyone's shocked, everyone's frightened, everyone's really terrified about where this is going to go. There are all kinds of heavy controls over populations everywhere. And then the next thing that happens in this chess game that's being played is that biological weapons are released on China. He heard this being discussed in this meeting. They will release a flu-like virus that will be genetically targeted against the Chinese population. It's racially targeted against the Chinese people. It's designed to spread like wildfire and to knock out a large number of the Chinese people. And these people in this meeting were laughing about this. They said, China will catch a cold. Those were their words. China will catch a cold. And they were laughing about the fact that these biological weapons will wreak havoc among the Chinese population. And after that, then what effectively will be a kind of plague will actually spread right across the world to the West as well. Our source was not clear whether this was a Chinese retaliation or whether the thing would just spread out of control in the way that it would be very understandable if it did, whether it's racially targeted or not. These things actually mutate. So now you've got a situation where there's been a limited nuclear war in the Middle East. There's a pandemic that really is sweeping across the world and really is killing people very visibly. And you've got this totalitarian military lockdown in all the governments in the Western world because everyone's going to be in panic about all of this. And then, he said, then the real war starts, something that would be justifiably called the Third World War with a much more major nuclear exchange. And at this point, I asked him, is this just about population reduction? What is this about? Why are they doing this? Why this insane Dr. Strangelove plan for just unleashing all of this stuff on the world? Why do it? Now, as our conversation went on, I started to find answers to those questions. Now, some of this is speculation. I want to share the speculation with you because it's important enough that we work together here to figure out what's going on. And there are some clues, there's some very important clues I'm going to present to you here in this video. He said, absolutely, it's about population reduction. So I said, well, in this meeting, did they mention any figures? And he said, yes, they did, 50%. Half the world's population. This is planned as per the Georgia Guidestones. For those of you who don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are, it's a stone monument in Georgia in America that was erected anonymously a number of years ago. It's in 8 languages, and it's like an Illuminati manifesto for a new world, as it were. And just hold that thought about this being a manifesto for a new world. This is an important concept here in what I'm presenting. One of the key parts of this manifesto for this new world is that there should be a population of 500 million people. Now, 500 million people is an enormous reduction from the nearly 7 billion that we've got at the moment. That's pretty much 95% of people who would no longer be on this planet. And 50% is a step towards that. And there's a reason why they're doing all of this. There's a reason why they're in a hurry. There's a reason for this insanity. And when he was explaining this, then he said that they have a name for this plan. This project has got a name. And I said, well, what is this name? He said, it is called the Anglo-Saxon Mission. The Anglo-Saxon Mission. Now, I'd heard that before. It was something historical, I think, to do with the Crusades quite a long time ago. But I hadn't heard it in the present-day context, and neither had he. And later on, as he continued to tell his story, I began to understand what I thought this might be about. Hence the title of this video, and the reason I want to share this information with you, because we need to work together to figure out what's going on here. It's extremely important to understand. There's a plan, I believe, that Hitler would be proud of, which is so evil, it's so Machiavellian, it's so hard to face up to, it's so unbelievable, that I need to put it on the table for you so that you can consider whether or not this might be a possibility. The plans that I've been describing are definitely a possibility because he heard them with his own ears in this meeting. Everything I've described up until now, up to and including a major outbreak of hostilities after the limited war. So the sequence is as follows. The plan sequence is as follows. Israel attacks Iran, then there's a ceasefire. Then, during which time there is heavy governmental military controls over populations in all Western countries. Then China is attacked by a biological weapon. It's a flu-like disease, it spreads like wildfire. This goes all over the world, and then they have a major Third World War. And then, by this time, 50% of the population will be destroyed. And not only because of the war or the plague, but because, as many of you watching this will understand, the infrastructure goes down in situations like this. There's no food in the supermarkets, there's no gas in the pumps, the telecommunication goes down, there may not even be water coming out of the taps. People are kind of thrown back into the Victorian era without the facilities to handle this, because most people don't have their vegetable gardens, they don't have their horse and cart, they're not able to survive in the way that we used to be able to. We're very, very vulnerable in our technological advancement, we're extremely vulnerable, and of course the controllers know this. At this stage, our source was speculating about why are they in a hurry? Why do they want to do this? And there's a sort of heavy irony here, which is like, I was saying, well, if you're going to plan the Third World War, then why not take your time over it and get it right and do a really good job? You can, this could be in 20 years' time or 30 years' time, it doesn't really matter. Why is there in such a rush? And our source said that he felt, from inside information he's continued to receive, that this is still timed for something around 18 months from now. That puts it around about the middle of 2011. He doesn't know this for sure because these events aren't calendar-driven. They're actually event sequence-driven. In other words, this has got to happen before that happens, and then after that the next thing can happen, then after that the next thing can happen. So a whole lot of things have got to be in place before all the dominoes fall over, so to speak. And they seem to be behind schedule in some of this. There are some planned events that definitely haven't happened. One of the things which I remembered when I was hearing this story was that our source, Henry Deacon, and many of you who've watched Project Camelot videos and read their reports for the last 3 years will know that when we met Henry Deacon in 2006, he said that from his own inside information was that there would be a war against China in 2008, and that didn't happen. And all this time, at that time it didn't make any sense, and even now it didn't make any sense. It's like, well, all right, but why do this? Why do this? Why do this? Now, this was his answer. And our source is a pretty smart guy. He's been in the military. It's a totally different story that he didn't debrief in our audio transcript, which you have the opportunity to read, but he's had his own ET experiences in the military. He's got his own sources of information about some of the background for this. He says that he's as sure as he can be that the people who are calling the shots in the world, you can call them the Illuminati, the controllers, the cabal, whatever name you have for them, they believe that there is going to be what he called a geophysical event, a major geophysical event. He says that the best information that he's got is that the insiders believe that this is going to happen, or they are concerned that this is going to happen. And many of you watching this will know that this isn't a completely crazy idea. There have been trillions of dollars that have been spent on deep underground bases for some reason, which we don't know why it is. You'll know about the seed bank in Svalbard. This is in the public domain, where all the seeds of all the plants and all the crops in the world have been buried deep inside a vault in northern Norway. There are many precautions being taken as if something might happen that could really threaten some of these valuable resources, including the seed banks of the world. Now, if there is going to be a geophysical event as they believe, this is because it seems to be preserved Illuminati inside knowledge, whether it's true or not, that there are repeated cyclical geophysical events about every 11,500 years. Information about what really happened to Atlantis was very probably in the Great Library of Alexandria that burnt down a couple of thousand years ago. There are persistent rumors that much of that information has been retrieved and it's in the Vatican Library. This is information which is not in the public domain and which the insiders may have access to. Whether it's accurate or not, the important thing is to realize that they probably believe that this will happen and they're making their precautions. And this might be the justification for this insanity that we just heard about in this plan. Consider this. He said if there's going to be a major geophysical event, something like a pulse shift, maybe it's Planet X, maybe it's some kind of energetic phenomenon that the solar system is going to be moving into, that's going to somehow destabilize the Earth or the Earth's crust in some way, we don't know. But if there were to be a major emergency like that, something that would actually make a war look very inconsequential, the thing that will help the human race to survive it, or will help parts of the human race to survive it, is if there is already emergency preparedness in place before it happens. In other words, if you knew that there was an emergency coming, if you knew, for instance, that there's a hurricane coming in to hit your city, then you put all the emergency preparedness in place beforehand. You have the troops ready, you have the infrastructure ready, you have the military ready, you have everything that you need ready to handle this situation so you can respond and react and recover in the best possible way. Our source suggests that the reason for this whole Third World War scenario is that then the Western governments, with the Chinese out of the way, will be in a state of such totalitarian control of their own population that they will be best equipped to recover and rebuild the new world after a cataclysm. And he thinks that this is what's happening. And I have to tell you that this terrible logic makes sense to me, that they would think that way. I'm not for a moment agreeing that this will happen. I think this is wild, crazy stuff, but if they believe that it's going to happen, then this could be their justification for this kind of plan that we've heard about is really being discussed. And this now is my own speculation right now, which also makes sense to me, and I invite your comments and your thoughts about this. We need to work together to figure out what's happening here. It's called the Anglo-Saxon Mission. What that told me was that the reason for the name is because this is a white, racist agenda for the inheriting of the new Earth. It's a plan that Hitler would be proud of. If they think that a new Earth needs to be rebuilt, a new world, think of that little phrase there, if a new world needs to be rebuilt after a cataclysm, they want the Anglo-Saxons to be doing it. They don't want the Chinese to be doing it. They get the Chinese out of the way first, and then the Anglo-Saxons will inherit this new world with the other nations, the Asian nations, the African nations, the South American nations. Presumably, it is assumed that they won't have the resources to be able to handle the situation in any kind of a way that gives them the strength to recover after whatever it is that they think is going to occur. So there are several other parts of this which also fit, and one of the reasons why this is an important presentation to make personally is my own personal thoughts, because up until now, I've been following a lot of the well-founded research on these sorts of agendas. We've had our own sources of information over the last 3 years. But I've always had questions in my mind, like, why would they do this? War against China? Why? Third World War? Why? And suddenly, a lot of these things start to make a little bit more sense. It's possible, for example, that when we heard from Jordan Maxwell in our interview with him, which we did at the end of last year, 2009, he described to us how he had researched a number of repeating symbols and images that had been used ever since the time of Hitler, and even long before that, about the dawn of a new day. There's something very important in Masonic and Illuminati thinking about the dawn of a new day. And here we have possibly the reason for their belief that if you think about the possibility of a cataclysm, if they think this is really going to happen, the 2012 movie that many of you would have seen, after all of the flood and all of the earthquakes and tsunamis, and you've got these big ships sailing across a calm sea with the sun streaming through the clouds, and you've got the dawn of a new day, and the implication in that movie is that now those people will be able to rebuild the new Earth because those are the survivors. It's the modern day Noah's Ark. It's possible that the dawn of a new day, that it refers to that. And it even occurred to me, and I'd be interested for other researchers to offer their views on this, that the very term the New World Order that we first started to hear about 20 years ago, actually longer ago than that, but the New World might be the post-cataclysmic world, the New World. It might be the order for the New World after the cataclysm. They may be planning who will inherit the New World. It may be nothing less than this. Maybe this is what the New World Order is all about. It really is the order, the plan for the New World that they think is coming. They think this is going to happen. Now, I say again, it's very, very important to differentiate out all this information here. I don't believe this is going to happen at all, but they might be doing something crazy to try and safeguard what they believe is their own interests. This is what we need to be aware of here. And what I want to do is I want to just state really clearly why there are profound reasons for not believing that anything like this is going to happen. There are a lot of things that haven't happened, which were intended to happen. Many of you will remember I think it was the 30th of August 2007, there was a B-52 bomber that flew halfway across America from Minot Air Force Base to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana with 6 armed nuclear cruise missiles on its wingtips, something that could never happen by accident. It was illegal, it should never have happened. You can't even smuggle a bullet out of the weapons storage area in an Air Force Base without there being a whole bunch of signatures and everybody knowing about it, let alone making the mistake of loading armed cruise missiles onto a B-52 bomber with nobody noticing it. There was a reason why that happened, and that was actually prevented from going any further. It stopped at Barksdale in Louisiana. Some very brave airmen blew the whistle on that, and they did their job, and they reported it up the line. It appeared very, very briefly in the mainstream media, and after that it was completely covered over, and everyone said it was a mistake. That was no mistake. There was a reason why they did that. And what many of you don't know is that at that same time, at the end of August, a group of anonymous investors bet $2 billion that the stock market would fall by 50% before the 21st of September 2007. They stood to gain $4.5 billion if their bet had succeeded. These were what are known as put options. And the insiders in the stock market, they call them bin Laden trades. It's a sort of ironic description because of the betting that took place around about 9/11. Okay, those people lost their bet. It didn't work. The plan didn't work. The stock market didn't fall. The bomb never went any further. And for all we know, that was intended to be the start of the Third World War. It never happened. Okay. We heard a few minutes ago, I was describing how Henry Deacon described that the war against China was meant to start in 2008. That didn't happen. A lot of people thought that was crazy. A lot of people thought he was crazy. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he heard something that was a real plan, but they're 2 years behind schedule, and maybe this will never happen at all. There are a number of other things that may have been planned and which have never transpired. It's very interesting to think about the so-called Mexican flu outbreak, the swine flu outbreak. For the last 6 to 9 months, we've been looking at a scenario where it looked as if they wanted to roll out vaccinations, they wanted a lot of people to get ill, they wanted to announce a pandemic. Even now, there have been proposals to extend this pandemic declaration for another 2 years, and nothing's happening. In England, we call it a storm in a teacup. There's nothing happening here. But maybe something was intended. Now, If it wasn't intended, it's possible that all of that could have been some kind of a test, just to see how people respond, to see how people react, to see how quickly it spreads, to see what the take-up of the vaccinations will be. And then, of course, us at Project Camelot and a number of other people who've been activists in this whole area trying to draw attention to all of this know we're on the database. They know who's going to stand up and start talking about all this stuff. So it might have been an experiment, or it could have been a failed rollout of something. There's plenty of reason to believe that things are changing. This is the important thing. And those of you who've been following the work of David Icke, this is an important perspective here, because we support his work fully, inasmuch as he makes a beautiful presentation, and he starts off by saying, we are infinite consciousness. There are many ways to put this, but it's very hard to disagree with that. We're immortal, godlike beings who've long ago forgotten what our power was. The potential of consciousness is enormous. It's very important to realize that how powerful we are may be the single most important component in this whole picture that enables us to save the day. This may be what it's really all about. Admiral George Hoover, who died in 1998, he was in the Office of Naval Intelligence in the US Navy. He talked to researcher Bill Burns, the editor of UFO magazine, and Bill Burns described this conversation with George Hoover to George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM. And what Admiral George Hoover told Bill Burns was the biggest secret, according to what the American Navy had found out. Very, very interesting story. They were talking about the Roswell visitors, and Admiral George Hoover said that these visitors were us from the future. They were time travelers. They weren't extraterrestrials. Now, other researchers and whistleblowers have spoken about the same thing, and this is fascinating in itself. But what Admiral George Hoover said the biggest secret really was, it had to do with the abilities and the power of the consciousness of these travelers. Because they were us from the future, what the military authorities had found out was what humans are really capable of. And he said that this had been buttoned up really tight, because if we knew how powerful we really were, how powerful we really could be, then we would, in his own words, cause chaos around us, and this would never be permitted. We could rearrange the reality around us in the way that we wanted to, in the way that, if this is real, that the future humans have learnt how to do, which gives them access to these sorts of incredible abilities, such as time traveling. Philip Corso, in his book, The Day After Roswell, described in some detail how his understanding was that the way the craft works was they were like an amplification of the pilot's own consciousness. It was their consciousness, it was their ability to travel and bilocate that was amplified by the craft, and that actually all of these abilities are basically abilities connected with the consciousness of the beings themselves. And if they are us, this is the message for all of us here. We're being deliberately dumbed down. Our food is being poisoned. Our children are being lied to in the schools. We're being fed propaganda in the media. We're being forced into this tiny little box. We're being kept busy with game shows and ball games, and we are discouraged from really finding out what it is that is our heritage on this planet. Eric von Däniken has just published a book which is called History is Wrong. There's so much which we are denied. George Green describes that we are known as the useless eaters, this surplus population of billions of people, with a tiny number of people at the top of the heap who are dependent upon us to please each other and to laugh at each other and to stop each other from getting out of line, because we're encouraged to conform to how we're meant to be. And so there's this straitjacket that there's the opportunity for us to break out of, and it's this straitjacket which has been deliberately put in place by these very people who've been creating this plan. Where this plan originates from is very interesting to speculate. Our source told us that this has been in place for a long time. He first heard about the Anglo-Saxon nation as long ago as 1976. The Illuminati symbolism about the dawn of a new day has been going on for a long time. Many people think that this plan requires such a superhuman level of intelligence and strategic understanding, and is so ruthless and so cold, that the logic suggests, and David Icke says this, Jordan Maxwell says this, we say this ourselves with full agreement, that this didn't come from a human source. People aren't capable of doing this against other people. There's something else behind this. We have to think big. We have to think from the highest spiritual viewpoint that we possibly can do, that these people shouldn't be fought. What must happen is we just withdraw our consent from these things that are being done to us, from this plan that we're part of. And as I was saying just before, if you're in the military or if you're in intelligence services, withdraw your consent from this, because these plans can't happen without it. There's something about the Illuminati and the way that they're operating that is very limited. They're using force, they're in a box, they're trying to counter what everybody I know is recognizing and referring to as a huge expansion of consciousness all over the world, expansion of awareness. We get emails every day from people, often very young people, who are saying, I can really see what's happening in the world. Tell me what to do about this, but I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to do whatever it was that I came here for. I don't know what that is yet, but I know that we've got big problems. 20 years ago, people weren't saying that kind of thing. There's a huge rollout of some kind of an expansion of consciousness. It's a morphic field that's growing enormously. And there's something that's changing. And my personal belief is that this is certainly being supported by benevolent non-human agencies, let me put it this way, who know about this kind of plan. They don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but they know that it's being planned. A lot of contactees, there's some channel information, need to consider channel information extremely carefully, but there is channel information, there are contactee reports that all talk about scenarios like this, and how we must be wary, how we must be careful, how we've got to guard against it, how we've got to insure against it, how we've got to be prepared for something like this. And it's entirely possible that this increase in consciousness is happening in direct response with this escalation of violent, forceful plans. It's like, as I've often said in my own presentations in the past, it's a little bit like a movie script itself, where you've got everything building up to a climax, so the forces of evil and the forces of consciousness just kind of getting ready for some kind of final confrontation. Now, I'm not trying to be biblical about this, and I know that the situation which I've just been describing is a little bit like the Armageddon War, but I do not believe that this kind of thing will actually come about. As I've said many times before, there's an interview which I did on Freedom Central, which you'll see on the Camelot site, where I say the single strongest reason that I have for not believing that anything is fixed, that we're all doomed, that anything really bad is going to happen, and I think we've got a lot of problems to solve, is because I wouldn't be here, and neither would you watching this now. I've incarnated on another planet. I've gone somewhere else. I'm not going to go and sit here in the firing line with no possible way of escaping. there's a job to do here, and many of you watching this will be aware of the fact that we're here to do jobs. It's what Dolores Cannon calls volunteers. We may be here for a reason. We may be here to help catalyze this increase in consciousness, and that's what's going to prevent this kind of thing from happening, because if we do not agree that this is the future that we want, then that's not what we're going to experience. We do all co-create our reality, we do all have a part in it, and I profoundly believe that by becoming aware of these plans, this is the way that we avert them. There's a difference between prediction and prophecy. These are two words in the English language that are easily confused with each other. Prediction and forecasting is saying, okay, in 3 months' time, this is what's going to happen because this is what the data leads us to conclude logically. That's all about forecasting and prediction. A prophet does something different, and it's a word to be used with care because it's often misused, it's often misunderstood, and it's like a biblical term, and some people react against it for that reason. But what a prophet always used to do is to say, listen, if we don't wake up and if we don't take action, then this is what's going to happen. And the purpose of the prophet giving this prophetic warning is not to warn people that it will happen, but to say, listen, you've got to change something here. You've got to change the way you're doing things, you've got to change the way that you're being, you've got to change the way you're interacting with each other, you've got to change your whole attitude. Whatever it is that you change, then the purpose of the change is so that this prophesied event doesn't happen. And so what we have here is we have a kind of prophecy. It's not a prediction. And I'm using this word very, very carefully because the reason why I'm making this statement, the reason why we're releasing this information is to make sure that this doesn't happen. What are we going to do with this information? It's going to be translated into every language that we can. The video is going to be subtitled in Chinese, Arabic, Russian, Spanish, every other major language. I want this video to be picked up by the Chinese. I want this to be escalated up the line. The Chinese are very sensitive about videos that refer to them, especially ones with Chinese subtitles. This will be reported right up the line to Chinese intelligence, to Chinese military commanders. And the reason for that is because, first of all, if this is nonsense, it doesn't matter. Okay? But if this is a really serious threat, then those are the guys who need to know about it, because their first nuclear response, which is designed to be provoked, is the thing that actually sets this whole thing on fire. And so, to any Chinese military commanders who are listening to this, don't do it. Okay? None of us must do anything here that is in alignment with their plans. There's a wonderful scene in the Avatar movie that I love so much, which was when the woman helicopter pilot who was ordered to fire her weapons at a big tree, she's just about to fire, and then she says, I didn't sign up for this. And then she turns around and she goes home. She's not going to be part of this. There are many people in the military who never signed up for anything like this. There are many people in the intelligence services, they've never signed up for anything like this. They signed up when they were young, thinking that they were doing the best thing for their country, thinking that they're doing the best thing for mankind. They're not all evil at all. And so as a direct message to those of you in the military and intelligence services who may be watching this or may have had this brought to their attention, you don't have to do this stuff just because you're told. You need to support what's best for the human race. You don't need to follow orders if it's going to lead to huge destruction here, which is in no one's interest apart from the controllers who have an agenda of their own, and that agenda doesn't feature you and me, that's for sure. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. I want you to consider this information. I'm not urging you to believe it. I want you to research it. I want you to check it out. I want you to read the transcript carefully. And I want you to see whether this correlates with anything else that you know and understand that's come to your attention. We're all working together here. I'm not trying to force you to believe anything at all. We need to be careful about this information. But at the same time, if there's any chance that this is true, if there's any chance that this is for real, then we have to know about it. Okay? And if you are not sure what it is that you should be doing, then I say the same thing that I always say, which is do whatever it is that you came here to do. Because most of you watching this video are here for a reason. I do understand that you may not know what the reason is yet, but you're probably here for a reason. You're probably watching this video for a reason. Do whatever it is that you came here to do. This is Bill Ryan. Project Avalon, Project Camelot. It's the 16th of February, 2010. Thank you.
What we don't know about the situation at Roswell is whether these were extraterrestrial, whether they came from a hollow Earth, whether they came from another dimension. We don't know this, right?
We don't. The only clue that I had was from this naval officer. He was from the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, called George Hoover. We talked about him before, who said that he was a corpsman with the Navy, and that the military believed, and he said he knew, that these entities were not so much interplanetary, but they were literally time travelers. And the big secret is that they were us from the future, and that we and they had the same powers, and that was the real fear of the government, that we had the ability to manipulate reality around us. We've always had that ability. We just didn't know how to use it. And if we ever learned how to use it, and we're not ready for it, we would cause chaos, and that was the big secret that the Navy eventually found out.
We zijn hier bij Stanley Meyer, nu buiten zijn garage. En we hebben net zijn water-powered auto naar buiten gereden, waar er nu wat over gediscussieerd wordt. En er zijn dingen aan gewijzigd en zo, dus het kan op het moment niet lopen, maar we mogen het dus wel helemaal bekijken.
explain how this thing
Okay,
what
go
it
ahead.
does.
Yeah, can you zoom in back in here? Are we on?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now this is the hydrogen computer system, which was designed in order to be able to process the fuel, to produce the hydrogen gas from water and do it economically and be able to control its firing, go in the engine to allow the Volkswagen engine to run off of hydrogen. There's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. We had to go ahead and develop the laser, what we call the laser distributor, as you see right here, which is put between the conventional rotor cap and that of the rotor assembly. And primarily what this does, this sets up the electronic signals that goes back and triggers the computer system in order to allow the car to run successfully on hydrogen. In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels. We did this by simply now pulling off a portion of the exhaust gas that's coming from the engine, as you see through this tube here, that's going through this electronic regulator that's hooked up to the hydrogen computer. And basically what's happening is that as the ambient air is going into the engine and going through the burning process, it produces the non-combustible gases that retards the speed by which the oxygen atom unites to hydrogen and bring on gas ignition. So by simply using the non-combustible gases coming from the exhaust of the engine, we now modulate and control the speed by which that oxygen unites with the hydrogen, and therefore we are adjusting the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal that of gasoline or fossil fuels or even diesel fuel. And that gave us the number one retrofit capabilities of retrofitting the water fuel cell technology to an existing engine. And we do this electronically. The unit that you see right here, we call this a gas processor. And basically what we're doing is we're ionizing the ambient air gases that is now going into the process. And this allows us to trigger and use the hydrogen fracturing technology and tapping into a higher energy yield coming from the hydrogen. The unit you see right here, this is referred to as a resonant cavity. Water is now fed into the resonant cavity through this water tank, and as such, we now expose the water to a very high intense pulse voltage field and restrict the amps, and therefore the electrical polarization process now allows us to release the hydrogen economically from water. And by attenuating the voltage field, the amplitude of the voltage field, we now can control the rate of the production of the hydrogen gas on demand. So this is what's referred to as a constant demand generator. We also now extend or allow the voltage amplitude to increase even to a higher level and allow the water atoms to go into an ionization state, which gives us the ability even to produce a higher energy yield by producing more hydrogen gas on demand. So the fuel now coming from the water through the electrical polarization process going into resonance meaning that we're actually tuning into the dielectric properties of water, and it allows us to reduce amps down, flow down to a minimum, and allow voltage to take over that disassociates the water molecule on demand. And those fuel gases are now coming through this electronic injector system as you see here. So basically we're now feeding the ionized air from the gas processor. We're now also taking the water fuel gases that are now coming from ordinary water. We are now mixing it with the non-combustible gases and the ambient air gases and regulating those control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. And as a result, now we can tune in and allow this engine to run off of natural water. This system's approach, this particular unit here is referred to as the VIC, or the voltage intensified circuit technology. This is being miniaturized down to a very small, lightweight system. This is demonstrated in our systems engineering approach on the technology that we can apply it to other applications, not only in the transportation area but also in industrial applications. So it was paramount that we would demonstrate and have the technology solved for design engineering, retrofitting to existing energy-consuming devices, whether it's being run in an internal combustion engine or a diesel engine or hook it to an industrial process. So all of these design interfacing technology is now being solved. We're in the latter stages of what we call the pre-engineering system, which will now allow us to miniaturize the technology once we're completed on the design applications and take it into mass production. I'll give you a classical example of this. We've also developed from this technology, which we call the water fuel cell injector. And basically, this injector now is a miniaturized water fuel cell or miniaturized resonant cavity. And this technology now allows us to simply replace, we can bypass this part of the system's approach and now simply replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector. And as a result now, we can run the water up to the injector, which is now being processed and being exposed to a very high pulse voltage frequency. And as a result, as the water fuel is being going into the system, then the explosion takes place inside the cylinder. Therefore, it makes this an extremely fail-safe operable system. The cord that you see here is strictly hooks up to a very high intensity voltage pulse, and we restrict the amps to cause the electrical polarization process, which in turn the voltage amplitude now takes it and goes in the ionization state to perform the hydrogen fracturing technology. And then in turn, the high pulse voltage frequency now allows the ignition of the gases. So therefore, we do this electronically. And so this technology has taken us down to the water fuel cell water fuel injector, as you see here today, which gives us a very economical way of simply converting and running a conventional car on natural water. So basically what we do is we feed ordinary natural water in here, non-processed natural water. We now feed the ambient air gases being ionized. It's being mixed with the water. And then we mix the non-combustible gases going in the system that regulates the control and so allows us now to release the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen and do it on a controlled means. Further development on the technology centered around also the development of what we call the laser accelerator control. And this had to be developed in order to translate from a mechanical displacement to an electronic displacement in order to allow the hydrogen computer system to produce the gas on demand based on acceleration control. So what you're really seeing with the water fuel cell as it is today is that we have a full system engineering approach allowing us now to use water as a main fuel source to be able to run a conventional engine and run it on water and do it and equal or supersede the performance of a car running on gasoline and diesel fuel. Many people do not realize that when you run a car or truck on either gasoline or diesel fuel, you're actually running it on hydrogen. And all we're doing is using the hydrogen from water. And under the National Bureau of Standards figures shows that when you use water, the energy release is roughly 2.5 times more powerful than that of gasoline. So water is a very powerful fuel. And all you needed to do was solve the answers of, number one, producing the hydrogen economically, controlling it on demand, being able to adjust the burn rate of the hydrogen gas to co-equal the fossil fuels, and the third one was to be able to transport it without spark ignition. And we've solved all of these problems on the design engineering, and of course the water fuel injector, as I've shown you, now gives us the abilities to transport the water directly to the fuel injector, which is now going into the voltage zones, which now is performing the electrical polarization process that goes and triggers the hydrogen fracturing technology, but it's doing it inside the engine. So we all know that natural water is very stable, and therefore it becomes a very fail-safe operable system, as we pointed out earlier. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, yeah. So in a system engineering approach, in mass production, it looks like we can translate and reduce the systems approach down to a unit that costs roughly $1,500 per vehicle. For trucks, it will be slightly larger than that, below $5,000. It looks like we'll be able to reach the economics to it and use an ordinary natural water. You add nothing to the water. You don't process the water in any way. Now here's another feature to the system that everybody asks me about, is what happens to the water in the wintertime? Does it freeze up? Well, part of our technology was in the areas of development what we call a steam resonator. Now, since the unlike atoms take on opposite electrical charges, we simply use another part of our technology to restrict the Ansel voltage to take over, and therefore we agitate the water molecules, which in turn generates kinetic energy, which in turn heats the water. Now, this is phenomenal in the fact we consume very little electrical energy in order to heat the water. So there are very far-ranging advantages and features to the technology, ranging even in the areas that we now have a way of using voltage and by switching off amp flow and dealing with the environmental control areas. We're developing the technology in the areas of desalination of salt water. Whenever you have a free and abundant energy source like water, it's only limited to the imagination to put it to work. This technology is very applicable to desalination of the salt water, handling of toxic waste chemicals by high pulse voltage frequency and restrict the amps. We now can separate the molecular structure of toxic chemicals and render them useless and safe. It also takes us to the technology of combining unlike atoms that heretofore was not possible under the natural state of covalent link-up. This led us to the development of the EPG electrical generator technology, where we're able to manufacture a magnetized gas that exists at room temperature and enhance the electromagnetic field without increasing mass. So our technology since the time of the Arab embargo has been very far-reaching to give us a comprehensive energy source that we literally can use anywhere into the economies and move in a bilateral movement throughout the economies of the world to bring an energy source in. And as I pointed out earlier, the pending energy crisis will confront us very quickly. We literally have the ability now of systems engineering it to mass production very, very quickly, and hopefully be able to stem off this imminent energy crisis that is now occurring. A lot of people are not aware of that Kuwait produces or manufactures the majority of aviation fuel for the world, and it's anticipated, as pointed out earlier, that it's possible as much as 20% drop in aviation fuel may occur within 6 to 8 months. If that happens, then the dominoes effect will occur, and will start to trigger an energy shortage throughout the world. The same conditions that happen in the United States is also occurring in the Arab fields, where the natural pressure in the existing oil fields are dropping. The only difference between the U.S. and the Arab fields is their pressure is dropping 3 times faster than occurred in the United States. You just can't keep pulling the oil out of the ground and expect it's going to be there forever. The hourglass effect is occurring at a more faster rate now on nuclear power plants. China's opened the doors to Western technology. 25% of the population of the world wants the same goods and services that you and I have been enjoying, and the industrial base cannot be maintained or expand without the supply and utilization of energy, of which we have very little fossil fuel left. So it's imperative that we develop the technology that we can move very quickly, and of course water was the answer to it, because water is a very free and abundant energy source. And so this technology has led us to the abilities of harnessing and using the water in this particular way, which we call the water fuel cell technology.
Could you give an indication of the amount of energy stored in a gallon of water compared to a barrel of oil, for instance?
Yes. As I pointed out earlier, when you separate the hydrogen and oxygen gases and go into the gas ignition process, its energy release is roughly 2.5 times that of gasoline. Now note the reference is not 2.5 times that of fingernail polish, it's 2.5 times that of gasoline. But in the hydrogen fracturing technology, we have developed a technology, as the Lord has shown me, that by igniting the hydrogen and oxygen gases and setting up a condition by which the water molecule is prevented to form, then we now can tap into a very higher energy yield. And as a result of this, the hydrogen fracturing technology shows that we can release energy up to beyond 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water and do it safely. And as I had shown you earlier, we are now preparing this technology to be retrofitted directly to a jet commander, which we plan not only to fly around the world nonstop around the equator, but turn 90 degrees and go from the North and South Pole. So it's a tremendous amount of energy source. And what we've done is found a triggering process to allow us to release this tremendous amount of energy and do it safely. So it gives us the ability to not only sustain and maintain the economies of the world, but also give us the abilities to handle the environmental pollution problems at the same time. We can't keep putting CO2 in the air and expect that the energy level is going to be there even for our plants. And we all talk about the greenhouse effect, but very few people come up with a viable answer to it. And the water fuel cell technology gives us the ability to get us.
Yes. Stanley, can you explain your driving force behind spending all this money and energy developing something like this? I mean, it's cost you about 10 years of your life. Can you explain why you're doing all this and what really drives you to keep?
Well, I did an analysis during the Arab embargo as to what actually occurred. I didn't pay any attention to the political leaders as to why we had an energy problem. And I realized that without a new free and abundant energy source to come into the world economy very quickly, then the world economy could collapse. So as a scientist, I have a very diversified background from research development, product development, engineering, and corporate entrepreneuring. And when I realized the problem that was confronting us, I went into my office laboratory. And as a scientist, I had always believed that there was an existence of God. It was mathematically impossible that we had derived ourselves from swamp gas. If you got to have a lot of faith, you have to have a lot of faith to believe in evolution. And so I went into my office laboratory and I said, God, I love my country. It's the greatest country in the world. If you'll help me put a power supply in the country, I'll do anything that you want me to do. And subsequently, I was like Paul on the road to Damascus. I didn't know the Lord, but once he revealed himself to me, subsequently I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and I've been exercising the power and authority of the Word of God, bringing this technology in. And many people ask me about, do I fear my life? I have learned the power of angels, and I have been protected in trying to bring this technology in. The ultimate objective is not only to stabilize the economies of the world, but if we realize any funds from the technology, it will go into world evangelization. You see, as a scientist, once truth is shown to me, truth is truth. And, of course, I got what I wanted, a ticket to go into heaven. I got filled with the Holy Spirit. And so, as a scientist, truth is truth. And I have a responsibility, just as I have a responsibility to the water fuel cell technology to try to bring it out into the world. I also have the responsibilities to relate the truth of the Word of God, not only to the guy, to the next door neighbor or the guy down the block, but also relate that truth or that knowledge to every person in the world if I possibly can do it. So the ultimate objective of the water fuel cell technology really is to help set the financial base of capable of evangelizing the world. Now there's a difference between spiritual knowledge and worldly knowledge. And you can't go to the world system and ask them to help evangelize the world and spread the gospel. But you can go to a world system and give them a cheap power supply that's so economically, they'll stable them economically, and then those funds will go into the world evangelization. So the water fuel cell technology, really, the ultimate objective is to accomplish the task of evangelizing the world by giving the financial abilities to do so. And that's my ultimate and prime objective. The water fuel cell will give us the abilities to do this.
Can you explain, you mentioned one Bible text, what do you mean by that?
Well, if you notice on my logo, you'll see Job 38, verse 22 and 23. And this is where the Lord is talking to Job, and he asks Job this question. He says, have you considered the treasures of snow, or have you considered the treasures of hell, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against battle and war? Now, the interpretation of the scriptures are as follows. Is not snow the most beautiful part about water? That no one snowflake looks exactly the same as that of another? The treasures of snow is the characteristic and knowledge of water. The Lord knew that, in fact, that we would have and reach a very critical point in our history, that since we went on dependency of fossil fuels, the flow of fossil fuels may be disrupted. And as a result, the Lord specified that this knowledge of water would come out of time of great trouble. But he also specified that the knowledge would come out prior to two events.
Okay, Sam, now that you've heard how the thing functions, you explained your background, why you're working on this thing, what do you think of possible applications And where do you think this device can be applied, in what scale, and what's the amount of energy we can get out of it? Like you talked before about converting cars, commercial airplanes. Is there any other application you think of?
Oh yes, not only is this technology applicable for all modes of transportation, but it also has application in industrial processes. During the Arab embargo, I was called in a meeting in Columbus, Ohio with the industrial leaders, and Columbia Gas System informed us that our gas was being cut off 100%. What actually were telling us that we were going out of business. And I saw some of the most richest and most powerful industrial leaders of the state popping pills, and I thought they were going to have heart attacks. Because basically without energy, you can't make a product. If you can't make a product, you can't make profit. If you can't make profits, you cannot pay your bills. So the result, the bigger you are, the harder you fall, the faster that you would go in economic bankruptcy. So it was imperative that this technology not only be developed for the transportation areas, but also to apply to industrial applications, to be able to give energy. The technology and hydrogen fracturing technology that gave us the abilities to go in and to protect the military integrity of the Western world. So this technology is applicable not only in those areas, but for example, during the Arab embargo, our Navy task force did not have the fuel. And so as we have the abilities now to go on the maritime applications, literally run the ships off of water as a main fuel source, and at the same time using the application is cleaning up our environment and preventing from the CO2 and the contaminants that go in the air. So we can move this technology bilateral in every aspect of the economy and do it very, very quickly. And so that leads us now into the fact that we have been developing this technology for mass production. And so once we finalize debugging of the pre-engineering unit, then we're going to translate it into a very cost-effective system by taking the technology into microchip technology, and plastic mold injection technology allows us now to move this type of technology very quickly. Matter of fact, one master mold set can produce over 11,000 units every 24 hours. That gives us abilities now to move in a bilateral movement, but to get the energy source throughout the entire world quickly, if the oil is shut off to us, either by war or by some other methods. A lot of people do not realize Saddam has the viral germ through genetic restructuring, that if he uses it, it lives off the bacteria of air and water and even of oil, and if he uses this, it's possibly that the oil could be contaminated very quickly. And if that is so, then every country in the world would be faced of shutting off the flow of oil to each of their countries. Now, without the supply of fossil fuels, within 180 to 240 days thereafter, about 1.5 billion people would be facing starvation very, very quickly because we need that flow of energy in order to maintain the industrial bases of the world. So we've designed the technology to be very flexible to use to every segment of the economy and do it very quickly. So we're all in the same boat. And what we're doing is illustrating that, yes, the technology is viable. Here we do have a viable technology that we now can use water as a fuel source, because water is a very free and abundant fuel source. But it's going to take you and I and the guy down the street and the people in each country to bring this technology into the marketplace to stabilize their countries. And so as a result, we are developed it under the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, to comply with the law of economics, that the guy who comes up with the cheapest way is going to win out. So by decentralizing the mass production of the system and the fabrication of the system, and decentralize the installation of the system, then we should be able to move in a bilateral movement throughout all the countries of the world to get this type of technology into their countries to stabilize their economic base. If the oil is cut off by these means, or it simply is being cut off by a lack of supply of oil that's now showing. It's the same natural pressure that dropped in the airfields, as I pointed out a little earlier, is also occurring in the North Sea. The North Sea pressure has dropped by 1/3. So we all need the energy, and so therefore I feel that it's going to take the people of the world to come together, and the leaders of each country to come together in one accord in order to allow this type of technology to go and to stabilize their economic basis in each respective country.
Do you have any time scale for mass production set up yet? And second, do you have any organization, or you're planning an organization, international? Or?
Yes, we are. I'm negotiating with many leaders of different countries of the world. But the ultimate objective is to mobilize the masses of the people in order to bring it in. This is the only way that can come in. And so as we finalize our debugging of the system and take it into mass production areas, we can do this by simply turning the technology over to many fabricators and people who have certain skills in the machining areas or mass production areas that will allow this type of technology to be produced very quickly.
Okay. Thanks very much for this interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll see your red light.
Autofocus is on now. Okay, go ahead. Okay, Stanley, can you give us some idea about the size of a conversion kit for a car, for instance? We see all this electronics sitting there, but I guess this is not going to be part of a future upgrade kit for a car, is it?
No, basically what this was a pre-engineering unit in order to satisfy the U.S. Code of Operability on Section 35, Section 101. And it was developed as pre-engineering to show the operability of all the different operational parameters of water fuel cell. But in actuality, the entire technologies you see here is really reduced down to the water fuel cell injectors you see right here.
So this is the only thing that's needed for upgrading a car, or is there anything else involved?
No, the water fuel cell injector, which replaces the conventional spark plug in an internal combustion engine, this is hooked up to a water tank. Basically, if you have a plastic fuel tank in your car, you simply drain out the gasoline, flush it out, fill it up with fresh water. Then the water fuel cell injector now allows the water to be transferred. The system approach allows the water to go in to the injector, which is now being processed to release the thermal exposure energy from hydrogen. The second part that's hooked up to it is what we've referred to here again as the gas processor that's ionizing the gas to allow it to come in. So basically in retrofit, all we're doing is simply tapping off the exhaust gases from the conventional engine. We're now using the gas processor to utilize the ambient air to ionize the gases, which is now mixing with the water, which now converts it to water fuel. We allow the water fuel to go into the injector that's now plugged into our replaces your spark plug, and allows the engine now to run off the thermal exposure engine from hydrogen. So basically, all we're doing is taking the gasoline out of the tank, fill it up with water. We now replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector, and we now hook a small little miniaturized computer which controls and meter mixes the gases going into the engine to allow the engine to accelerate and deaccelerate. So the installation is quite a very small, lightweight, compact electronic control system.
Okay, now the distributor, is that going to be the same? Can you use the same distributor, or do you have a modified version, or is there anything additional to it? Can you explain about that?
We do modify the distributor as it's shown over here. We simply take off the conventional gas rotor cap out of a conventional engine, and we put the laser distributor in between the distributor assembly and the cap, and this now sends the signals to the computer system, which will really be a composite of several IC or integrated circuit chips that miniaturizes the hydrogen computer system.
Okay. This whole hydrogen stuff, isn't it extremely explosive in the car? Is there any danger involved? What's the safety aspect of all?
No, we have actually solved the problem. There's no storage of hydrogen whatsoever. The water goes into the injector, which now allows it to go into a high pulse voltage zone, which performs the electrical polarization process. So the water is only converted into thermal explosive energy as it enters the injector. So the thermal explosive energy is now occurring inside the engine. So the electronic system is designed to regulate and control the explosion of the energy, which now co-equals that of gasoline. So it's a tremendously fail-safe, operable system.
Okay, so it's safe, it's a small system.
Yes.
What about maintenance of the car engine itself? Do I need more maintenance? Is it different? Is there anything, do I have to modify anything on the maintenance schedule?
No, just keep the same maintenance as you have it. Since you're releasing thermal explosive energy into the engine and you're co-equaling the burn rate of gasoline, then there's very little maintenance. If there is any maintenance at all, we developed the technology years ago that we could really impregnate the cylinder walls of the engine with Teflon, and we can even impregnate and treat the bearings and literally run an engine off of the Teflon and eliminate the oil. If that occurs, then you can use a product something like Slick 50 in the engine if you would need it. But the wear factor, since it's a very clean burning fuel, hydrogen is a very clean burning fuel, then the engine oil is not contaminated under the old method of running on gasoline or diesel fuel. So it's an extremely clean burning fuel.
Good.
Are we on? Yeah, the
Low temper. Good, Stanley. What about the valves in the engine? The pistons don't the pistons burn out because there's no lubrication of the lead or any other additives to the usual gas?
No, the valves, have been designed very recently to operate off of non-leaded gasoline, and since we use the exhaust gases to cycle back in to modulate the burn rate of hydrogen gas, as we now control the burn rate to co-equal gasoline, then the engine temperature and operations are duplicating the same thing on gasoline or diesel fuel. So you don't change the engine in any way. And this allows us now to retrofit the water fuel cell technology to any existing engine. And that's very important because it now gives us the ability that we can stabilize transportation, as we talked about before, if the energy is cut off.
Okay, so now the accelerator. Can I still keep the same mechanical accelerator, or do you have a new device for that as well?
Yes, we developed over here as we come along. We've developed the what we call a laser accelerator, as you see right here, that simply is attached to the accelerator pedal, and it as you press the pedal down, the gas pedal down, it displaces the mechanical displacement into electrical impulses, which now is fed into the micro-miniaturized computer electronics. So this gives us the abilities now to control the acceleration. This type of technology has given us the abilities to equal or supersede the performance of acceleration and de-acceleration on conventional cars that's running on gasoline or diesel fuel. So the hydrogen, being 2.5 times more powerful than gasoline, gives us a tremendous amount of performance over the prior state of the art. It runs very smoothly, and it has a very unusual sensation. Generally, when you're running a car on gasoline, you have this kind of a pause. But when you're running on hydrogen, the way we're doing it, it's a constant acceleration. So it's a extremely very fast responding fuel source that's coming from water.
So you're claiming that performance is equal or better as a normal gasoline car?
Oh yes, definitely. It'll even start up quicker. In the wintertime, you're dealing with a liquid gasoline or liquid diesel fuel, and you have problems in starting. In cold weather, you don't freeze gas atoms, and so by converting the water into instant energy, gives us the ability to start the engine very, very quickly.
When you start an engine in the morning, for instance, how long does it take before you can drive away?
Oh, it's an instantaneous startup. Immediately when pulse voltage frequency hits the water, it converts it to the gas, which now produces a thermal explosive energy. So it's an instant type of start.
Okay.
The electronic circuit interfacing gives us the abilities to control and meter the amount of water that's going in on the start condition as opposed to on a run condition. So the computer automatically adjusts between the start condition and the run condition. So electronically, we have the abilities to adjust for these parameters. And the same as a conventional car, we also have the abilities to adjust for different ambient air conditions going from sea level up into the mountain ranges. So automatically, the electronic circuitry design gives us the abilities to adjust these parameters to give us a very smooth operational performance.
But what about air pressure? I mean, when you go up high in the mountains, you don't use ambient air, so it has no influence on the performance of the car.
No, if you come over here, here we have a device is a metal bellows, which now allows to control the amount of ambient air going into the engine of the car. And this automatically allows us to regulate the ambient air pressures going from sea level up into the mountain areas. So electronically, these solenoids you see here has sensors that automatically senses the amount of ambient pressures, and they're automatically electronically adjusted to compensate it for difference of air pressure. So this allows us now to give us tremendous good performance going from sea level right on up into the high mountain regions.
Dr. Tiffany Anderson, superintendent of the Jennings School District, begins her morning with a 4-hour commute to work, after which she can be found, sneakers and all, out on crossing guard duty. Anderson oversees 7 schools, 3,000 students, and hundreds of teachers and staff, but there's no job she won't do.
I bring hot chocolate, coats. I'm the first face they see before they walk through the door.
Jennings is a town of 15,000 people just outside St. Louis, Missouri. It borders Ferguson, which was the center of protests following the shooting of an unarmed black teenager by a white police officer in 2014. Like Ferguson, Jennings has a population of mostly African Americans, 1/4 of whom live below the poverty line.
What was this school district like when you first arrived?
4 years ago, Jennings didn't really feel like a community that had hope. Almost every month, I am attending a funeral of either a current student or a student's parent, and often those are, victims of crime. We have 2 students at one of our elementary schools where they literally had to crawl out of the window as their mother was being stabbed. Things that we can't imagine.
17-year-old Gabby Scott is a junior at Jennings High School.
How old were you when you found out you were pregnant?
15. It was rough.
Did you cry?
I did, a lot. So much I probably don't even have tears left.
Just a few years ago, many students in Jennings were in danger of not graduating. Dropping out was not an unusual occurrence.
Did you think about, how am I going to go to school and have this baby?
That was the first thing that was brought to my mind. I don't think I'm going to be able to go to school and be pregnant.
Do you think that people had sort of written this school district off?
I think in many ways, because Jennings has so much poverty, people really weren't sure if improvement was possible.
With grants, partnerships, and some creativity, Dr. Anderson balanced the budget, launched a college prep program, and brought back arts education. She also began to address issues that stemmed far beyond academics.
I learned that food was the greatest issue, so we decided we would open a food pantry. We give out 8,000 pounds of food a month. Approximately 200 to 400 people every 2 weeks get food from Jennings. And then we looked at healthcare. We have about 2 to 3 mental health therapists at every school. Washington University, they agreed to partner, and they provide a pediatrician. So look, you break an arm, just come to school, we got it.
This is a place where parents can come and do their laundry for free in exchange for volunteering an hour of their time at school. And it's pretty incredible when you think about it, because it's such a simple way to get parents involved while at the same time addressing the very real needs of many of these families.
We generally say if all you can do is make it to school, we'll take care of the rest. Food, clothes, shoes, healthcare.
What kind of changes did you start to see in your students when you started to remove those barriers?
So when kids knew that we cared, there was almost like this light bulb went off, this willingness to try. We are now fully accredited. 4 years ago, we were meeting 57% of the standards. We now are meeting 81%. We've been exceeding the state benchmarks for 2 consecutive years.
Dr. Anderson also introduced a program to support teen moms like Gabby, as well as parents in the community. It allowed Gabby to stay focused on school while raising her son, Carter.
On top of having a baby, you are a straight A student, right?
Yes.
You are going to be class president?
Yes.
And you're on your way to being valedictorian?
Yes.
How are you doing this all? How are you managing it all?
I have teachers who are willing to work with me in my time management. Carter comes with me to my student council events.
If you were pregnant before all of these programs were introduced, before Dr. Anderson, what do you think your life would be like?
Probably would have given up a long time ago. But with the support of Jennings and their programs, it's been easier. We are all passing our tests, willing to come to school. It's making us more excited to be here.
This community borders Ferguson, which has seen a lot of unrest. This is a critical time in our country. Has that brought greater urgency to the work that you do here?
I believe our role is to show people that there is a system of oppression and to gain the greatest amount of education they can so that they have the power to make changes.
Can this work be replicated in other places?
You know, this work we've done in Jennings can happen anywhere, in any size district, and in any community. Zip codes should not determine the quality of education or health care, and we will not allow for that to determine where kids end up.
To see how this young woman conquered incredible odds to become a Gates Millennial Scholar, watch this next video.
Outside of my house, it was a lot of gangs, and my sister was always involved with them. I saw so many graphic things that she went through.
Did you ever think about joining a gang?
No, it made me more focused. I was always the nerd of the family.
And please don't forget to subscribe to Secret Story so you can see new videos every week.
Let's talk about the core of all communication, the thing that determines how persuasive you are if you get what you want, in the case of this video, if you live or die. Speaking of, I should let you know that we'll be exploring this particular thing through the world of Game of Thrones. So yes, life and death does come into play, and the thing that we're going to be exploring is called a frame. And you'll see that in a lot of ways, the Game of Thrones is really a game of frames. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First off, what is a frame? A frame is basically all of the unstated beliefs that give context to any interaction. The frame gives meaning to the words that we say. So the difference between me saying cool and saying cool comes from the belief that I have when I say that word. The first thing that I want to talk about is the importance of frames when trying to convince someone of anything. In this next clip, the two characters whose faces that you're going to see are passing through the woods when some pretty savage people who roam the mountains find them. Watch this clip and see if you can note each person's frame, meaning each person's beliefs that they bring to the interaction.
Come, share our fire. Help yourselves to our goat.
Clearly, there are a handful of different frames in this scene. You've got the people who are surrounding them, and their frame appears to be, you're surrounded, we're in control, and we are going to kill you. Bronn, the guy who pulls his sword, has the same exact frame, except that he intends to fight so that he doesn't get killed. But Tyrion, the dwarf, proposes a totally different frame. He acts as if they're friends. He acts as if he's inviting them to share their food and their fire, like they just stumbled upon him. The genius of this frame is that if they accept it, he will escape with his life. So let's watch what happens.
When you meet your gods, you tell them Shagga, son of Dolph, of the Stone Crow, sent you.
I am Tyrion, son of Tywin of Clan Lannister.
How would you like to die, Tyrion, son of Tywin?
Here, Tyrion responds in the same fashion as the man that he's speaking to, saying his father's and family's name. Again, his frame is that they're introducing themselves as friends, but clearly it's not going so well. So now he's tried this friend frame twice. It's not working, so what can you do? Because this type of situation with much, much lower stakes is going to happen in your life. You will want someone to assume your frame, but they're going to resist. So watch how Tyrion handles it.
In my own bed, at the age of 80, with a belly full of wine and a girl's mouth around my cock.
He totally breaks this guy's frame with humor. See the laughter there? In this frame, and in real life too, laughter is a telltale sign that someone has had their frame shifted. Usually, it's the person who is laughing that has had their way of viewing the world disrupted. And in this case, the guy with the axe thought that Tyrion should choose right then and right there how he died. Tyrion purposely misinterpreted his question. He added a bit of humor, and that was enough to make this guy break his frame and laugh. If you've ever tried to be mad at someone while they continually make you laugh over and over and over again, you know what this feels like. It gets tough to stay mad at them because they have reframed you and they've interrupted your pattern of being upset. In these moments, right after someone has shifted their frame, is when they are most open to being persuaded. So the lesson here for your own life, nothing to do with Game of Thrones, is that if you're trying to persuade someone and they're being resistant, don't just keep pushing. Instead, you need to reframe them, and humor is a great way to do it.
Take the half man. He can dance for the children. Kill the other one.
No. My house is rich and powerful. If you see us through these mountains, my father will shower you with gold.
We have no use for a half man's promises.
You see here, Tyrion doesn't just plead for their lives. Now that he's broken their frame and at least gotten them to listen, he can begin to persuade them. And if you're interested, I can cover the full list of persuasion tactics that Tyrion uses because there are many, but suffice to say that if someone is being resistant while you're trying to persuade them, the answer is not to just go over and over again down the same path. You need to disrupt their pattern, you need to reframe them, and then you can begin to speak to their interest and speak more logically. For now, let's just continue talking about frames and move to insults. Every single insult that you've ever said or heard is a frame game. Even from the school days of, I'm rubber, you're glue, the goal is generally to turn the insult on the person who said it. And I do not recommend engaging with someone who's putting you down or insulting you. I usually just try to take the frame of, this isn't worth my time, and then walk away. But it's still informative to watch how frames determine exactly who wins one of those back and forth exchanges. So watch this clip. In this case, Tyrion is talking to Robb Stark, who does not like him or his family very much. Watch here.
Slightly warmer welcome on my last visit.
Any man of the Night's Watch is welcome at Winterfell.
Any man of the Night's Watch, but not I, eh, boy?
I'm not your boy, Lannister. I'm Lord of Winterfell while my father is away.
And you might learn a lord's courtesy.
This is a fairly straightforward insult, or even just a diss. Tyrion calls Robb boy, insulting his inexperience, and then Robb denies it, saying that he is a lord. Tyrion responds by saying that he isn't behaving exactly like a lord should. So despite his protests, Robb, the guy at the end here, doesn't come out of that exchange looking so great. Fighting the frame of an insult normally makes you look like a chump. Watch this next clip in contrast. In this one, the same guy, Robb, has become commander of a huge army and is speaking to a prisoner from Tyrion's family, the family that he hates.
Just not with yours.
Smart boy. What's wrong? Don't like being called boy? Insulted.
Again, same insult, same guy. You're a boy, you're inexperienced, you're just playing at war, which is really not a great thing when you're in command of an entire army. But this time, something has changed. Watch how instead of fighting the frame, Robb flips it and he uses it to his advantage.
Will you insult yourself, Kingslayer? You've been defeated by a boy. You're held captive by a boy. Perhaps you'll be killed by a boy.
You see that? He takes the prisoner's own words and uses them against him. This works much, much better because an insult is really just a battle to see who can control who. When you get mad at an insult and you fight it, you have already lost. But when you don't fight the words and instead change the frame, meaning that you turn their insult into praise for you or an insult to them, then you have taken control. That is how you win the frame game. Not by having the best zinger, but by being the person in control. So, the third and most important frame game that I want to talk about is options. And for this, I need to give a little context for non-Game of Thrones fans. Tyrion, the dwarf, is wrongfully accused of murdering the king. He's basically set up his trials a total farce, and he's told that his options are death or to plead for his life and to be granted exile into the coldest, northernmost part of the world where he'll basically have to work as a servant for the rest of his life. He's told that those are his only choices and that he'd better just beg for his life, beg for exile in order to save himself. But instead, he creates a third option, and this is one of the most famous scenes of the entire series.
Have you nothing to say in your defense?
Nothing but this. I did not do it. I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish that I had. I will not give my life for Joffrey's murder, and I know I'll get no justice here, so I will let the gods decide my fate. I demand a trial by combat.
This is basically how Tyrion survives all of his encounters. He creates a third option that other people don't see. Everyone thinks that the choice is between exile and death, and he chooses trial by combat, which strictly speaking in this world is legal, but nobody presented it to him as an option. Earlier in the series, again, when he was wrongfully framed for another assassination attempt that he didn't commit, he's held in prison until he confesses. Those are basically his options. He can die in prison or confess to a crime that he didn't commit. But instead, he cleverly stages a confession and uses that public arena to his advantage. He's able to shame his captors into giving him a trial. Watch this.
Is this how justice is done in the Vale? You accuse me of crimes. I deny them. So you throw me into a cell to freeze and starve. Where is the king's justice? I am accused and demand a trial.
The point is this: whoever controls the options has the power. Your options are rarely exactly what people tell you are, because that's how people have powers. They control options. The truth is that everything that is possible changes based on your creativity. Nothing is fixed, so you need to be resourceful. You need to not take what other people put on the table as your only choices. When you're faced with a decision that says this or that, and you don't like either choice, refuse them both and create a third way. The way out is probably going to be different every time, but the realization that your options are never just exactly what people say they are, and that you can break free from the options that are presented to you, is going to be valuable for the rest of your life. That's how you stay alive in the Game of Thrones, and that is how you win in the game of life. If you're interested in learning more about solidifying your frame so that you don't lose these frame gains and miss out on options, we've actually created a separate video on improving your confidence and your conviction. It is a real-life exercise that you can do to boost your confidence in about 1 minute, and I've used it repeatedly in those situations where a strong frame is really, really important, from interviews, tough conversations, first dates, all those sorts of things. So if you want to see that video, go ahead, click the link that will pop up right now. You're going to be taken to another page where you can drop your email and get the immediate access to that video. If you haven't done so yet, please click subscribe right now, the button on the video. You'll get notified of our videos every week and never miss a new one that way. Also, a huge, huge thank you to everyone who has subscribed. It is because of you that I can put so much effort into these videos and make more than one a week now, which I'm very happy about. So thank you guys very much. Your support means a ton, and it's the reason the channel exists. So again, thank you guys. Lastly, let me know if you've enjoyed this video in the comments. I don't normally do fiction. This is the first time I've ever done it, but if you liked it, I can do more. And if not, quite frankly, I will not. So your guidance is going to be what determines the direction that this channel goes next. Please let me know in the comments. I take that very seriously. That's why we did this video in the first place, but I want to know how you think it went. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, hope that you learned something, and I will see you in the next one.
Raise your hand if you've ever been asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, if you had to guess, how old would you say you were when you were first asked this question? You can just hold up fingers. 3, 5, 3, 5, 5. Okay. Now, raise your hand if the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, has ever caused you any anxiety? Any anxiety at all? I'm someone who's never been able to answer the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? See, the problem wasn't that I didn't have any interests, it's that I had too many. In high school, I liked English and math and art, and I built websites, and I played guitar in a punk band called Frustrated Telephone Operator. Maybe you've heard of us. This continued after high school, and at a certain point, I began to notice this pattern in myself, where I would become interested in an area, and I would dive in and become all consumed, and I get to be pretty good at whatever it was. And then I would hit this point where I'd start to get bored. And usually I would try and persist anyway, because I had already devoted so much time and energy, and sometimes money, into this field. But eventually, this sense of boredom, this feeling of like, yeah, I got this. This isn't challenging anymore. It would get to be too much, and I would have to let it go. But then I would become interested in something else, something totally unrelated, and I would dive into that and become all consumed, and I'd be like, yes, I found my thing. And then I would hit this point again, where I'd start to get bored. And eventually, I would let it go. But then I would discover something new and totally different, and I would dive into that. This pattern caused me a lot of anxiety for two reasons. The first was that I wasn't sure how I was going to turn any of this into a career. I thought that I would eventually have to pick one thing, deny all of my other passions, and just resign myself to being bored. The other reason it caused me so much anxiety was a little bit more personal. I worried that there was something wrong with this, and something wrong with me for being unable to stick with anything. I worried that I was afraid of commitment, or that I was scattered, or that I was self-sabotaging, afraid of my own success. If you can relate to my story and to these feelings, I'd like you to ask yourself a question that I wish I had asked myself back then. Ask yourself where you learned to assign the meaning of wrong or abnormal to doing many things. I'll tell you where you learned it. You learned it from the culture. We were first asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, when we're about 5 years old? And the truth is that no one really cares what you say when you're that age. It's considered an innocuous question posed to little kids to elicit cute replies, like, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a ballerina, or I want to be a pirate. Insert Halloween costume here. But this question gets asked of us again and again as we get older in various forms. For instance, high school students might get asked what major they're going to pick in college. And at some point, what do you want to be when you grow up goes from being the cute exercise it once was to the thing that keeps us up at night. Why? See, while this question inspires kids to dream about what they could be, it does not inspire them to dream about all that they could be. In fact, it does just the opposite. Because when someone asks you what you want to be, you can't reply with 20 different things. The well-meaning adult will likely chuckle and be like, oh, how cute, but you can't be a violin maker and a psychologist. You have to choose. This is Dr. Bob Childs. And he's a luthier and a psychotherapist. And this is Amy Ung, a magazine editor turned illustrator, entrepreneur, teacher, and creative director. But most kids don't hear about people like this. All they hear is that they're going to have to choose. But it's more than that. The notion of the narrowly focused life is highly romanticized in our culture. It's this idea of destiny, or the one true calling. The idea that we each have one great thing we are meant to do during our time on this earth, and you need to figure out what that thing is and devote your life to it. But what if you're someone who isn't wired this way? What if there are a lot of different subjects that you're curious about and many different things you want to do? Well, there is no room for someone like you in this framework. And so you might feel alone. You might feel like you don't have a purpose. And you might feel like there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. What you are is a multi-potentialite. A multi-potentialite is someone with many interests and creative pursuits. It's a mouthful to say. It might help if you break it up into 3 parts: multi-potential and ite. You can also use one of the other terms that connote the same idea, such as the polymath, the Renaissance person. Actually, during the Renaissance period, it was considered the ideal to be well-versed in multiple disciplines. Barbara Scher refers to us as scanners. Use whichever term you like, or invent your own. I have to say, I find it sort of fitting that as a community, we cannot agree on a single identity. It's easy to see your multipotentiality as a limitation or an affliction that you need to overcome. But what I've learned through speaking with people and writing about these ideas on my website is that there are some tremendous strengths to being this way. Here are 3 multipotentialite superpowers. 1, idea synthesis. That is combining 2 or more fields and creating something new at the intersection. Shaw Wong and Rachel Binks drew from their shared interests in cartography, data visualization, travel, mathematics, and design when they founded Meshu. Meshu is a company that creates custom, geographically inspired jewelry. Shaw and Rachel came up with this unique idea not despite, but because of their eclectic mix of skills and experiences. Innovation happens at the intersections. That's where the new ideas come from. And multipotentialites, with all of their backgrounds, are able to access a lot of these points of intersection. The second multipotentialite superpower is rapid learning. When multipotentialites become interested in something, we go hard. We absorb everything we can get our hands on. We're also used to being beginners because we've been beginners so many times in the past. And this means that we're less afraid of trying new things and stepping out of our comfort zones. What's more, many skills are transferable across disciplines, and we bring everything we've learned to every new area we pursue, so we're rarely starting from scratch. Nora Dunn is a full-time traveler and freelance writer. As a child concert pianist, she honed an incredible ability to develop muscle memory. Now she's the fastest typist she knows. Before becoming a writer, Nora was a financial planner. She had to learn the finer mechanics of sales when she was starting her practice, and this skill now helps her write compelling pitches to editors. It is rarely a waste of time to pursue something you're drawn to, even if you end up quitting. You might apply that knowledge in a different field entirely, in a way that you couldn't have anticipated. The third multipotentialite superpower is adaptability. That is the ability to morph into whatever you need to be in a given situation. Abe Cahuto is sometimes a video director, sometimes a web designer, sometimes a Kickstarter consultant, sometimes a teacher, and sometimes apparently James Bond. He's valuable because he does good work. He's even more valuable because he can take on various roles depending on his client's needs. Fast Company magazine identified adaptability as the single most important skill to develop in order to thrive in the 21st century. The economic world is changing so quickly and unpredictably that it is the individuals and organizations that can pivot in order to meet the needs of the market that are really going to thrive. Idea synthesis, rapid learning, and adaptability. 3 skills that multipotentialites are very adept at, and 3 skills that they might lose if pressured to narrow their focus. As a society, we have a vested interest in encouraging multipotentialites to be themselves. We have a lot of complex, multidimensional problems in the world right now, and we need creative, out-of-the-box thinkers to tackle them. Now, let's say that you are, in your heart, a specialist. You came out of the womb knowing you wanted to be a pediatric neurosurgeon. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with you either. In fact, some of the best teams are comprised of a specialist and multipotentialite paired together. The specialist can dive in deep and implement ideas, while the multipotentialite brings their breadth of knowledge to the project. It's a beautiful partnership. But we should all be designing lives and careers that are aligned with how we're wired. And sadly, multipotentialites are largely being encouraged simply to be more like their specialist peers. So with that said, if there is one thing you take away from this talk, I hope that it is this. Embrace your inner wiring, whatever that may be. If you're a specialist at heart, then by all means specialize. That is where you'll do your best work. but to the multi-potentialites in the room, including those of you who may have just realized in the last 12 minutes that you are one. To you I say, embrace your many passions. Follow your curiosity down those rabbit holes. Explore your intersections. Embracing our inner wiring leads to a happier, more authentic life. And perhaps more importantly, multi-potentialites. The world needs us. Thank you.
For most of human history, the idea of being polite has been central to our sense of what is required to count as a good and civilized person. But more recently, politeness has come under suspicion. It can sound a bit fake and insincere, and in its own way really rather rude. We often tend to prefer the idea of being frank and speaking our own minds. The rise in our collective suspicion of politeness has a history. Politeness used to be central to our education. Etiquette books and guides to manners were all deemed essential. Yet in the late 18th century, the approach was thrown into disrepute. An alternative, romantic ideal emerged, in large part driven forward by the Swiss philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who powerfully redescribed politeness as an indication of civility and deceit, and argued in favour of always remaining true to yourself. The romantic suspicion of politeness was given a further boost by the increasing role of the United States. Being direct and open came to be seen by Americans themselves as one of their national virtues, an attitude encapsulated in a climactic line from Gone with the Wind, when Rhett Butler turns to Scarlett O'Hara and tells her exactly how he sees it.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
And because America has been the world's most influential culture for around a century and a half, its attitude towards politeness has been widely and pervasively disseminated around the planet ever since. What ultimately separates the polite from the frank person isn't really a knowledge of etiquette. It's not really about what knife to use at a formal dinner, when to say please or thank you, or how to word a wedding invitation. It comes down to a contrasting set of beliefs about human nature. The polite and the frank person behave differently, chiefly because they see the world in highly divergent ways. These are some of the key ideological issues that separate them. Frank people believe in the importance of expressing themselves honestly, principally because they trust that what they happen to think and feel will always prove to be fundamentally acceptable to the world. Their true sentiments and opinions may, when voiced, be bracing, of course, but no worse. These frank types assume that what is honestly avowed cannot really ever be vindictive, disgusting, tedious, or cruel. In this sense, the polite person sees themselves a little in the way we typically see small children, as blessed by an original and innate goodness. Even the most etiquette-conscious among us don't usually think that the strictures of politeness will apply to the very young. We remain interested to hear about whatever may be passing through these diminutive creatures' minds, and we stay unalarmed by their awkward moments or negative statements. If they say that the pasta is yuck, or that the taxi driver has a head like a weird goldfish, it sounds funny rather than wounding. The frank person's trust in their basic purity erodes the rationale for editing or self-censorship. They can believe that everything about them will more or less prove fine, whatever they happen to say or do. The polite person, by contrast, proceeds under a fervent suspicion of themselves and their impulses. They sense that a great deal of what they feel and want really isn't very nice. They're closely in touch with their darker desires and can sense their fleeting wishes to hurt or humiliate people. They know they're sometimes a bit revolting and cannot forget the extent to which they may be offensive or frightening to others. They therefore set out on a deliberate strategy to protect others from what they know is within them. It isn't lying as such, they merely understand that being themselves is a treat they should take enormous pains to spare everyone else from experiencing, especially anyone they claim to care about. The frank person operates with a charming unconscious assumption that other people are at heart pretty much like them. This can make them very clubbable and allows them to create some astonishing intimacies across social barriers at high speed. When they like listening to a particular piece of music at high volume, they'll take it as obvious that you probably do as well. Because they're very enthusiastic about spicy food or never want to add salt to a dish, it doesn't cross their mind to ask if you actually like this restaurant or would favour a salt cellar on the table. For their part, the polite person starts from the assumption that others are highly likely to be in quite different places internally, whatever the outward signs. Their behaviour is therefore tentative, wary, and filled with inquiries. They will explicitly check up with others to take a measure of their experiences and outlook. If they feel cold, they're very alive to the possibility that you may be feeling perfectly warm, and so will take trouble to ask if you'd mind if they went over and closed the window. They're aware that you might be annoyed by a joke that they find funny, or that you might very sincerely hold political opinions quite at odds with their own. Their manners are grounded in an acute sense of the gulf that can separate one human being from another. The frank person works with an underlying sense that other people are internally, for the most part, extremely robust. Those around them are not felt to be forever on the verge of self-doubt and self-hatred. Their egos are not assumed to be gossamer thin and at perpetual risk of deflating. There is therefore understood to be no need to let out constant small signals of reassurance and affirmation. When you go to someone's house, the fact that the meal was tasty will be obvious to everyone, not least the person who spent 4.5 hours cooking it. So there's no need to keep stressing the point in a variety of discreet ways. The office junior must have a pretty clear sense that they're making the grade, without a need to stop and spell it out. The frank person assumes that everyone's ego is already at least as big and strong as it should be. The polite person, however, starts from a contrary assumption that all of us are permanently only millimetres away from inner collapse, despair and self-hatred. However confident we may look, we're painfully vulnerable to a sense of being disliked and taken for granted. All of us are walking around without a skin. Accordingly, the polite person will be drawn to spend a lot of time noticing and commenting positively on the most apparently minor details. They'll say that the watercress soup was the best they've had for years. They'll mention that that work on the Mexico deal was really helpful too and was noticed by the whole company. They'll know that everyone we come across has a huge capacity to hurt us with what we foolishly and unfairly refer to as small things. There'll be an associated difference in how the frank and polite person behaves in service contexts. Frank people don't feel any great need to express gratitude. The waiter or the person at the car hire desk has, they feel, no special need of kindness on top of the money they'll already be getting from the transaction. Yet the polite person knows that we need to find respect and a form of love from our work as much as we need cash. So they'll be conscious of an additional need to contribute smiles and a pleasant word or two. These people are doing their jobs for the money, of course, but payment never invalidates an equally strong emotional hunger for a sense of having been useful, noticed, and appreciated by another person. The frank person is often very kind, but in a big way. They're interested in enormous acts of generosity and kindness towards major sections of humanity. Perhaps the rescue of the whole continent of Africa, or a plan to give every child in the country an equally good start in life. But a consequence of their enthusiasm can be a certain impatience with smaller moves and gestures. There's really no point, they may feel, in spending time and money sending people flowers, writing notes after dinner, or remembering birthdays, when a fundamental transformation of the human condition is at hand. The polite person also passionately cares about spreading kindness, love and goodness on a mass scale, but they're cautious about the chances of doing so on any realistic time horizon. Yet their belief that you perhaps can't make things a lot better for a huge number of people in the coming decades makes them feel that it is still very much a worthy goal to try and make a modest, minor improvement in the lives of the few humans you do have direct contact with in the here and now. They may never be able to transform another person's prospects entirely or rescue the whole species from its agonies, but they can smile and stop for 5 minutes to chat to a neighbour about the weather. Their modesty around what's possible makes them acutely sensitive to the worth of the little things that can be done before today is over. The frank person has a high degree of confidence as to their ability to judge relatively quickly and for the very long term what's right and wrong about a given situation. They feel they can tell who's behaved well or badly and what the appropriate course of action should be around any dilemma. This is what gives them the confidence to get angry with whatever strikes them as stupid and to blow up bridges with people they've become vexed with. The polite person is much more unsure. They're conscious that what they feel strongly about today might not be what they end up thinking next week. They know how easily they can get it all wrong. So they're drawn to deploying softening, tentative language and holding back on criticism whenever possible. They'll suggest that an idea might not be quite right. They'll say that a project is attractive, but that it could be interesting to look at alternatives as well. They'll consider that an intellectual opponent may well have a point. They aren't just lying or dodging tough decisions. Their behaviour is symptomatic of a nuanced belief that few ideas are totally without merit, no proposals are 100% wrong, and almost no one is entirely foolish. They know good and bad are deviously entangled. Their politeness is a logical, careful response to the complexity that they identify in the world. Both the frank and the polite person, of course, have important lessons to teach us. But it may be that at this point in history, it's the distinctive wisdom of the polite person that is actually the one most ripe for rediscovery, and that may have the most effective power to take the edge off some of the more brutal, aggressive, and in the end, counterproductive consequences of the reigning frank ideology.
Professor Harari is a good friend of mine and a professor in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He's been teaching a history class, an introductory history class for undergrads for quite a few years. And at some point he decided that it would be a good idea to compile the lecture notes to a book so that the life of his students will be a little bit more easy. So he wrote the book, and then what happened later was completely unplanned. The book became a bestseller in Israel. It was the top bestseller in the non-fiction books for a few months. Then translations to foreign languages came. The book has been translated to 30 languages. It's being sold now in Europe, most of the European countries, and in Canada with great success. And now it's coming to the US. And fortunately, that was our chance to bring Yuval here to visit us also and to give the talk at Google. So I'm really happy to introduce him. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here also, not only to visit Ran and Ariel, but also to be in Silicon Valley, which for me is a kind of special place as a historian. As a historian, I focus mainly on the history of ideas, ideology, mythology, religion. And I think that the most interesting place in the world today, in religious terms, is Silicon Valley. Not the Middle East, not Syria or Afghanistan or Israel or Jerusalem, but Silicon Valley. This is where the new religions that will take over the world are being formulated. And this will also be the topic of my talk for the next hour or so, about the new religions of the 21st century. But in order to understand the future of religion, we first have to say a few words about its past and its present. And I would like to start with asking describing what is the main religion or ideology, worldview of the world today, in the middle of the second decade of the 21st century. And I think we can say that the dominant ideology of the world at present is liberal humanism, or in short, liberalism. Liberalism is a worldview, an ideology, that thinks that the source of all authority and all meaning in the universe is the individual human, the individual of the species Homo sapiens. Liberalism has several core ideas. First of all, it believes in the individual. It thinks that every Homo sapiens is an individual, which literally means it cannot be divided. The meaning of the term individual is that you cannot divide it. The idea is, yes, of course you can divide the human body or the human brain, but within each individual, there is kind of a seed of light, a spark that cannot be divided further. Within each of us, there is this inner voice, and this inner voice in each and every one of us is the source of all the meaning and all the authority in the world. Whenever we face a difficult question, a difficult dilemma, choice in life, as individuals or as collectives, liberalism tells us, listen to yourself, connect to yourself, try to hear this inner voice within yourself, and it will tell you what to do. And listen to that, not to anything else. The second main idea or hypothesis of liberalism is that this inner voice within ourselves comes out of a space of complete freedom. Yes, there are influences, constraints from outside, physical, social, biological, but if we go deep enough within ourselves, we will come eventually to a space of complete freedom. And from this space, we need to make our big decisions in life. Thirdly, based on these two ideas or two assumptions, liberalism assumes that only I can really know myself. Nobody else, no outside person, no outside system can really know who I am. Because again, who I am really is this inner voice which enjoys complete freedom. So I'm inaccessible from outside. Based on these ideas, the main value of liberalism, which gives it its name, is liberty, freedom. We need to preserve the freedom of the individual to think, to feel, and to act according to what he or she thinks and feels, because again, this is the supreme source of authority and meaning in the world. Now, all this may sound very abstract and very theoretical, so I would like to give a few concrete examples of what liberalism means in practice to our lives as individuals and as collectives. If you think about the field of politics, so what is liberal politics? What is liberalism translated into political terms? You get a democracy with elections and so forth. If we want to know who should rule this country, what kind of economic policies to adopt, what kind of foreign policy to adopt, to make war or to make peace, who should we turn to in order to get answers? We should turn to the inner voices of each individual. So we have elections, and on election day, everybody goes by himself or by herself, and at least theoretically, I try to connect to myself to listen what is my deepest feelings, what are my deepest personal thoughts about this issue, and I vote accordingly. And this is how we know who should rule the country, whether to make peace or war, and so forth. So this is liberal politics, which argues that the voter knows best. There is no source of authority higher than the voter. You get the same ideas also in the economic field. What is liberal economics? Liberal economics is the view that the customer is of the. How do we know if a product is a good product? If the customers buy it. There is no other method. There is no higher authority that can say, yes, they didn't buy it, but it's still good. Let's say we are planning a car, and we are the wisest people, in fact, we get Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and and whatever, and they come together for 5 years with a lot of money, a lot of helpers, and they design the perfect car. And after 5 years, you start producing this perfect car, engineered, invented by the wisest people on the planet, and it goes on sale, and nobody buys it, or very few people buy it. It means that this car is not a good car, according to the tenet of liberal economics. Or perhaps, but eventually, you cannot blame the customer. Oh, we produced a perfect car, and we did a perfect PR campaign, but the customers, they are stupid. They don't understand what is good for them. This works in communism, for example. This is the idea of communism. You have really wise people sitting in Moscow. They plan the car which they think is best, and everybody, if they are fortunate, get this car. And if they don't like it, it's their problem. But not in liberal economics. In liberal economics, the highest authority in economics is the customer. You got the same ideas in the field of art and aesthetics. Many times in history, many periods, many cultures, people had ideas what is art and what is beauty. And they thought that there are some objective definitions, objective yardsticks to determine whether something is art and whether something is good art. And then comes along liberal art and liberal aesthetics in the 19th, 20th century. And just as in politics, the voter knows best. And in economics, the customer is always right. So in liberal art also, the customer or the viewer, he is the, or she is the highest authority. According to liberal art, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, in the feelings of the person watching or seeing the painting, the architecture, the play, whatever it is. In 1917, in a very, very famous gesture, Marcel Duchamp took a urinal, said this is art, called it fountain, signed his name, Marcel Duchamp, put it in a museum in Paris, said this is art, this is beautiful. And ever since then, in every introductory course to art history in university, they bring this image and the argument starts. Is it art? No, it's not art. Who determines what is art? Is it beautiful? It's not beautiful. And eventually, if you're liberals, you will reach the conclusion that art is whatever I define to be art. And beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Whatever I think is beautiful, it's beautiful. And nobody out there can come to me and say, you think it's beautiful, but it's not. There is some higher authority. If you think that this is art, beautiful art, and you're willing to pay millions of dollars for it, and it costs millions of dollars today, this fountain, then it's art. The same ideas also apply to the field of ethics. How do you know if an action is good or evil, if it's ethical or unethical? Well, suppose I live in the Middle Ages and I fall in love with another guy and I go to the priest and tell him in confession this and this happened. So the priest will say, this is very evil, what you have done, you'll go to hell for this. Why? Because God thinks it's evil, because scriptures say it's evil, because I, the priest, say this is evil. And then I say to the priest, but I feel very good about it. So the priest would say, but we don't care what you feel. Your feelings are unimportant. You don't determine what is good or evil by what you feel. Then come liberalism in the modern age and say, no, the highest authority in the field of ethics is also the feelings of individuals. There's nothing beyond that. If it feels good, do it. If you feel good about it, if everybody feel good about it, there is absolutely no reason in the world why it should be evil or bad. Now, there are, of course, problems. What happens if a particular action causes some people to feel good and other people to feel bad? This is when you have arguments within liberal ethics. Say, for example, an extramarital affair. I have an affair outside of marriage. I feel very good about it, but if my spouse finds out, he will feel bad about it, and probably I will also feel bad about it. And if we say we divorce as a result and we have children, they will feel bad about it. So what is more important? My good feelings at a particular time, or the bad feelings of my spouse or my children? So different people have different views on this question, but as long as they are liberal, the argument will be done in terms of feelings. The question will be, what feeling is more important? Even very religious people today understand this. And if you think about the terrorist attacks in France on the Charlie Hebdo, after the attack, all kinds of organizations, Muslim organizations, and even non-Muslim organizations, began to say things like, but look, this newspaper, it was not doing something very wholesome because it was causing millions of devout Muslims around the world to feel bad. It didn't take into account their feelings. Now, it's very interesting that they use this argument because even those who try to say it's not good to draw caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad, they don't say it's not good because Allah forbade it, or because it's wrong according to the Quran. They say it's not good because it hurts the feelings of people. So even those arguments are praised in liberal terms of feelings. And finally, just to give a last example, from the field of education. What is liberal education? The main idea of liberal education is that the student or the pupil is the highest authority, not the teacher, not the professor. In liberal education, the main thing you try to teach your pupils or your students is to think for themselves. They are the highest authority. You go from kindergarten to the university, and you ask the teacher, you ask the professor, what are you trying to teach? And he or she will say, well, I try to teach history or mathematics or physics, but above all, I try to teach my students to think for themselves. This is the most important thing. If he or she are liberal educators. It doesn't always work, of course. Not all the universities or schools manage to do it, but this is the general ideal accepted by all liberal institutions of education. Now, when we look at the world of today, in 2015, we can say that the liberal package dominates most of the world. This liberal package contains human rights, which are these walls, defenses established to protect the inner freedom of each individual. This is the human rights. This package contains belief in individualism, in liberal democracy, in free market economy. And I think we can say that not everybody accepts this particular package, but it is the dominant ideological package of the world today. And there is very little viable alternatives, or real alternatives to this package at present. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of social protests in different places in the world, but the vast majority of the protests were done in the name of the liberal values, not against them. People were coming to the governments and saying, you don't live up to the liberal ideals. We want the politics to be more democratic. We want the economy to be more free. They didn't have, the vast majority of social protests did not have any alternative to this package. They simply wanted it to be implemented better than it is being implemented today. Another potential source for alternative, which more and more people speak about, is China, the rising superpower of the 21st century. However, even though China is definitely an economic giant, it is still an ideological dwarf. In terms of ideology or religion, China has very little to offer the world, at least at present. In theory, officially, it is still a communist country, but it is very far from being communist in practice. And it has no alternative idea to either its official communism or to the liberal package of how else to run human society in terms of values. Maybe in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, we will see the rise of a completely new ideology in China. But speaking as of 2015, China is extremely good in business, in making money, in making products, but ideologically, it seems to be bankrupt. The third main alternative to the liberal package is radical Islam, or radical religion in general, but very often we focus on radical Islam. However, even though radical fundamentalist Islamic movements oppose the liberal package, they don't really have any relevant alternative that can be offered and implemented in the 21st century. The reason is that most of their ideas are out of date by centuries, by hundreds of years. The 21st century challenges humankind in new ways. We are facing enormous opportunities, enormous new opportunities, and enormous new dangers that we need to confront. And radical Islam has very little relevant things to say about these new challenges and new dangers. To give just a few examples, perhaps the most important question in 21st century economics is what do we need people for in the economy? In a situation when it is likely that computers will be able to do more and more things better and better than Homo sapiens, this becomes a real question for the first time in history. The most basic economic value of humans is being put in doubt. And nobody really has an idea how the job market would look like in 40 years or 50 years, and what humans will still be necessary for, or at least most humans. What will they do? If there is a young man or woman today, say 20 years old, going to college and asking himself or herself, what should I study today so that in 30 years I will have a good job? Nobody knows what to tell him or her. Nobody knows. We don't have a clue how the job market would look in 30 or 40 years. And again, it's not even clear that there will be different jobs. It's not even clear that there will be any jobs for most humans. Another very big challenge and opportunity is concerned biotechnology, the possibility of extending human life and human health indefinitely, with 80 being the new 40. What will this do to society, to sexual relations, to family structures? This is very big questions. Another very big question which emanates from this field of biotechnology is the possibility of, for the first time in history, real biological gaps opening between the rich and the poor. Previously in history, there were always gaps between rich and poor, but these gaps were social, economic, legal, not biological. There was no real biological difference between the king and the peasant. They had the same basic physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities. Now, with the advent of biotechnology, we are facing a possibility, it's not a prophecy, not certain, but there is a possibility of real biological gaps opening and Homo sapiens splitting into different biological castes or even different species. These are the kind of problems that we need to confront in the 21st century, and the problem of radical Islam and radical Christianity, Judaism, and so forth is that they have nothing relevant to say about these questions. They have no answers to these questions because they don't even understand the questions. If you read even very wise books written thousands of years ago, the people who wrote these books knew nothing about genetics, knew nothing about nanotechnology or computers. So how can you expect to get answers to these questions from people who didn't know anything about the subjects in question? Now, it's true that if you count heads, if you count people, there are many more people today on the planet that are interested in God and scriptures than in nanotechnology or genetics, or who understand these subjects. But history is not made by numbers. It's not that you need a lot of people to make historical changes. Very often, historical changes are made by relatively few numbers of people. If we go back to the last big technological and economic revolution that swept the world, the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, it was done by very few people. Most people in the 19th century knew far more and were interested far more in the Bible and the Quran than in steam engines or railroads or coal mines. The same thing we see today, we saw also in the 19th century. It was also full of religious fundamentalist movements. For example, in the Islamic world, you had in Sudan, the Mahdi, in the late 19th century, would establish a religious theocracy and also beheaded people and fought wars and so forth, caused a lot of stir in Victorian England when the followers of the Mahdi beheaded, executed General Charles Gordon, a famous British commander. Nobody almost remembers the Mahdi today. Similarly, in India, you had a religious revival led by Dayananda Saraswati, whose main idea, the main message Dayananda Saraswati had to the 19th century, to India in the 19th century, is that all the answers to all the questions are in the Vedas. In the holy scriptures of Hinduism, the Vedas are never wrong, all the answers are there. If you have any difficulty, open the Vedas or ask the Brahmins. Tens of millions of people followed him. In the Christian world, you also saw such movements. Pope Pius IX, the Catholic Pope, he in the middle of the 19th century had this new idea that the Pope is never wrong. It is a new idea, it's not an idea for the Middle Ages. The Catholic dogma that the Pope, the papal infallibility it's called, the Pope is never wrong when it comes to questions of ethics, morality, and so forth. This is not a medieval dogma. It goes back only to the middle of the 19th century. And then millions of people followed Pope Pius IX. In China, the biggest war of the 19th century was not the Napoleonic War, was not the American Civil War. By far, the biggest war of the 19th century was the Taiping Rebellion, which started in 1850 when this person, Hong Xiuquan, he had a vision. God revealed himself to Hong and told Hong a secret, that Hong was actually the younger brother of Jesus Christ. And he had a divine mission to establish the kingdom of heavenly peace on earth, starting with China. Millions of people followed him, and they did not establish any peace. They waged the most terrible war of the 19th century, with at least 20 million dead. These are the smallest estimates. So you had your full share of religious fundamentalism also back in the 19th century. Nobody almost today remembers these people or these movements. They did not change the world. The Industrial Revolution did. Well, these people in Sudan or in India or in China were concerned about scriptures and God and heaven and so forth. A few engineers and a few technicians and bankers and financiers in Manchester and Liverpool and Birmingham, they changed the world. They shaped the world in which we live today. Now, there was one ideological or religious movement which began in the 19th century, which did manage to change the world, which is far more important. And when we think back about the 19th century and we ask ourselves what was the big ideology, the big ethical ideas that came from this period, we think not about Pope Pius IX or the Mahdi, we think about socialism and communism. In 1800, there was hardly any socialists or communists, very few. Even in the middle of the 19th century, there was still a fringe group of bizarre people who have such thoughts. But there was one crucial characteristic about these bizarre people, like Marx and Engels, that enabled them to really change the world and to create an ideology that spread over the entire planet and helped to shape our life today. The crucial thing about Marx and Engels and later Lenin and Trotsky and all these fellows is that they did not just read old books from hundreds of centuries previously. They studied the technology and the economy of their own day. And they tried to create a new ideology which will be suited to the new opportunities and challenges of 19th century technology and 19th century economics. Lenin was once asked, in a very famous occasion, Lenin was asked by his followers, please, Vladimir, tell us in simple language what communism is. We are not going to read the Capital, a very, very dense book. We don't want to hear now this long philosophical talk. In very few words, tell us what communism is. And Lenin answers, communism? Communism is power to the workers' councils, the Soviets, plus electrification of the entire country. You cannot have communism without electricity, without the steam engine, without telegraph, radio, railroads. The communist system of production and economics demands these things. You could not have established a communist regime in 16th century Russia. Impossible. First, you must have an industrial revolution. Communism and socialism are custom built for the world following the Industrial Revolution. This is why they're so successful. In a way, communism and socialism were the harbingers of the new religions we see today in the 21st century, in the sense that they were based on technology and on the economy. After thousands of years in which technology played almost no role at all in religious and ideological thought, communism was the first techno-religion, a religion or ideology, if you prefer, that promises roughly the same thing that were promised by the traditional religions. It promised peace, prosperity, paradise, but here on earth, with the use of technology, not in the afterlife by the act of some divine power. This is the definition of a techno-religion. It promises whatever it promises here on earth with the help of technology. And communism was perhaps the first to show the way. It completely changed our entire ideological discourse. Previously, the main dividing lines between people in their beliefs concerned questions like, do you believe in God? What God? Do you believe in soul? What kind of soul? What happened after death? These were the main questions that divided, say, Christians from Muslims and Shiites from Sunnis. After communism, everything changed. Now people more and more began to define themselves by how they think about technology and economics. Sounds very strange, but not very long ago, 30 years ago, humankind was almost destroyed in a nuclear war between two camps who were divided not in what they thought about soul or God or the afterlife. They were divided in what they thought about how economic production should be organized. So communism really changed the rules of the game. Even if you don't accept what Marx said, you started speaking in similar terms in questions that you asked. And we see indeed that the traditional religions, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, they did not disappear. It's not that people stopped believing in them. They just became less and less relevant, less influential. They were transformed essentially from a creative force into a reactive force. In the Middle Ages, they were very creative forces. Much of the new technological, economic, political, administrative techniques of the Middle Ages were pioneered by the Catholic Church. The best equivalent for Silicon Valley in the 13th century is the Vatican. This is where all the new ideas about administration, about information processing, this is where we went, to the Vatican. The first archives, libraries, systems for archiving information, cataloging information. This is something the church was best in doing. If you're a king in the 13th century and you wanted somebody who knows how to handle information to help you run your kingdom, you turned to monks, you turned to priests. They were the experts. So back then, they were still very creative forces. But in the last 200 years, they became reactive forces. They're still there, but most of what they do is react to the changes, to the inventions, to the discoveries that other people make. Like somebody invents the contraceptive pill and completely changes the sexual sphere, and then the Pope and the priest, they scratch their head. What do we do with this? What do we do? Is it okay? Is it not okay? They react. Similarly, somebody invents the internet, and then you have all the Jewish rabbis also scratching their heads. What do we do with that? Is it okay? Is it like this, like that? And it's not only technology. Also new ethical ideas. The 20th century is full of them. Perhaps the most important is feminism. After thousands of years of patriarchal society, we have the feminist revolution, completely changing social structures, families, and so forth. And again, you have all the rabbis and ayatollahs and priests. They think, how do we need to react to that? It's not our initiative, but we have to do something with it. So they are reacting in this way or that way. A very good way of grasping the changing place of these religions in the world is to ask yourself two questions. First, ask yourself, what is the most important discovery of the 20th century? And this is a very difficult question because there is a lot to choose from. Perhaps it's antibiotics. Perhaps it gave each one of you at least 10 years of your life, on average, you owe to antibiotics. It's a huge difference. Maybe it's nuclear weapons. Maybe it's a computer. Maybe it's not technology, but some ethical idea, like feminism. Perhaps feminism is the most important discovery of the 20th century. Difficult question to decide. Now ask yourself a second question. What is the most important discovery made in the 20th century by theist religions? Religions that believe in God, like Islam or Hinduism or Judaism. Again, it's a very difficult question because you can't think about anything. What did these people discover in the last 100 years that changed our lives? Yes, they are still influential in the way that they react to the inventions and discoveries of others, but what new things did they discover? I at least can't think about anything which you can mention in the same sentence with antibiotics or feminism or nuclear weapons. So we see that the usual challenges that we think that perhaps there are still in the world of liberalism are not really challenges. Neither China nor radical Islam nor the social protests, they don't really have a relevant alternative to the liberal package. But this does not mean that liberalism is safe. Just the opposite. It seems that we are on the verge of the collapse of liberalism. And the collapse of liberalism will not happen because of things that people are doing now in Syria or Iraq or in Libya, but because of things that people are doing here in Silicon Valley, and in Stanford University, and in my university, in the Hebrew University. What kind of things? Well, it starts with the life sciences. The basic problem of liberalism today in the early 21st century is that the life sciences are telling us that it is nonsense. The basic beliefs on which liberalism are built were perhaps sounded sensible in the 18th century, in the era of Locke and Rousseau and these people, but there is a huge gap between what liberalism tells us about the world and about Homo sapiens and what the life sciences in the early 21st century are telling us about Homo sapiens. Liberalism believes in individualism, as we said earlier, that each one of us is an individual. We have this ray of light, this core, inner core, which is individual. This is a real self. Well, according to the life sciences today, there is no such things. All animals, including humans, are not individuals. They don't have souls. They don't have any essence. They don't have any inner core. They are basically a collection of biochemical algorithms, all kinds of algorithmic systems that build the brain, that build the human beings, the giraffe, the elephant, whatever it is. And if you peel all the layers, all the systems that make up an animal organism, like an onion, you peel one layer after the other, one layer after the other, in the end, you won't get an inner core of light or soul. You will get nothing. There's just nothing left. When you take out all these different biochemical algorithms, nothing is left. There is no individual. Secondly, these algorithms, these biochemical algorithms that make up an organism are not free. There is no such thing as freedom, according to the life sciences. All systems in nature, including these biochemical algorithms, they work according to just two possible principles. Either they are deterministic, or they are random. Perhaps some events on the quantum level insert a certain randomness into the biochemical processes of our brain, of our nervous system, of our body, but that's it. There is the word freedom simply has no meaning in the life sciences of today. Taking these two ideas together, that an organism, including Homo sapiens, which is just another animal, like the chimpanzees and giraffes and so forth, if an organism is just a collection of algorithms, and these algorithms are not free in any sense, this means that at least potentially an external system, external entity, can understand me perfectly. It just needs to understand all the algorithms that come together to build this machine, this structure. And the crucial thing is, the crucial insight is that even our sensations, even our emotions, even our feelings, liberalism believes above all else in our feelings. How you feel about politics, about art, about sexuality. This is the holy grail of liberalism, our feelings. But now come the life sciences and say feelings are just biochemical algorithms. Calculating what? Calculating either of two things. Probabilities of survival and probabilities of reproduction. That's it. The Homo sapiens, like giraffes, like elephants, they are calculating all the time. All their body is just a calculating machine for calculating probabilities of survival and reproduction. This again may sound a bit abstract, so I will give two simple examples. First of all, problems of survival. Let's say you're in a baboon, and you're somewhere in the savannah in Africa, and you see a tree with bananas on it. And you ask yourself, should I go and take these bananas? But you also see that there is a lion nearby. Now, should I or shouldn't I try and get these bananas and risk that while I eat the bananas, the lion will eat me? Now, in order to reach a good answer, what I need to do is to calculate probabilities. And I need to take into account a lot of information in order to do it correctly. I need information about the bananas. How far are they from me? Are there any obstacles on the way? How many bananas? Are they ripe or are they green? It's one thing if there are 20 ripe bananas, and it's another thing if there are just 2 unripe bananas. I also need information about the lion. How far is it? How big is it? Is it asleep? Is it awake? Does it seem hungry? Does it seem satiated? And thirdly, I need a lot of information about myself. How fast can I run? How hungry I am? If I'm on the verge of starvation, if my energy is so low that I may die within a few hours if I don't eat something, then no matter how big the danger is, I should try and get these bananas because otherwise I'll die anyway. If on the other hand, I just now had a big feast, there is no reason to risk my life for these bananas, even if the danger is relatively small. Now, to reach a good decision means a decision that will enable me to survive. I need to take all that information into account and weigh it together somehow, calculate all the probabilities together. How do I do it as a baboon? I don't take out a piece of paper and pen or a calculator or a computer. I don't have it, and I don't need it, because my entire body is a calculator that was built for millions of years by natural selection to do exactly that. What we call emotions, sensations, feelings are simply biochemical algorithms that take all that information, all the huge amounts of information from outside and inside, and in a split second reach a certain decision, a certain probability. Now, the result does not show up as a number, like in some futuristic science fiction movie that the baboon or the person sees a number out of his eyes. No. The result will come up simply as a feeling. This is what feelings are. They are the result of these calculations. If the result is that I should try and get a banana, it will come up as the emotion of courage. I will feel very courageous, my chest will be puffed up, and I will run to the bananas. If the calculations reach the conclusion, reach the result, that I shouldn't risk my life, the chances are too small, then the result again will not be a number, it will be a feeling. It will be the feeling, the emotion of fear. I will feel very frightened and run away. And sometimes the calculations are just in the middle. It's not clear if it's a good idea or a bad idea in terms of survival to reach for these bananas, and these two will show up as an emotion, as a feeling. I will feel confused. I will feel, I don't know what to do, to take the bananas, not to take them. These two will be a feeling. The other type of calculation problems that this machine is built to calculate concerns not survival, but reproduction. And again, you look at, if you're a peacock, you look at a peacock. If you're a human, you look at a human, and you need to make up your mind, sometimes very quickly, is this a good mate or not? And again, lots of information floods in, from the eyes, from the ears, from the nose, from within the body, and within a split second, you get the result, not as a number, but as a feeling. You will feel this is beautiful, this is attractive, oh no, it's not beautiful, it's not attractive, it's disgusting, whatever. All these sexual feelings, again, they are biochemical algorithms. They are not some spiritual whatever that comes from the sky. They are the result of very, very complex biochemical algorithms that natural selection has evolved and selected for millions upon millions of generations until they came to us. Now, so far, these biological insights actually supported liberalism. Because liberalism, as I said earlier, it believes in feelings as the supreme source of authority. What I feel, this is the supreme source of authority on the planet. And biologists will come and say, this is actually a very keen insight. This is true. Because if you want to make decisions about your life, and you have two potential sources of authority, say the Bible or your own feelings, biologists will tell you, go with your feelings. The Bible contains the wisdom of a few priests in ancient Jerusalem. That's it. Your feelings contain the wisdom of millions upon millions of years of evolution. The algorithms that are your feelings have passed the most rigorous tests of natural selection. Each one of your genes and each one of your algorithms is here today because it has succeeded for millions of years to pass the most rigorous tests of natural selection. So if you need to make a decision, you better go with your feelings. This was the situation maybe until today. But now things are changing. In two ways, things are changing. First of all, biologists decipher the biochemical algorithms that compose our body and that are responsible for our feelings. They are no longer mysterious entities as they were before. We understand them better and better, why I feel this way in this particular situation. And secondly, we have computer scientists that are creating better and better electronic algorithms. Now, the question that arises today is what will happen once we create an algorithm that knows me better, that understands me and my feelings better than I can understand myself? What will happen then is that authority will shift. It will shift away from the feelings of individuals to these outside algorithms. For our feelings at present, you can say, are the best algorithms in the universe. But after all, they are becoming outdated. They appeared maybe the way that we have them today, maybe a few tens of thousands of years ago in the African savannah. So far, they have been the best algorithms around, but we are now at the position to produce an updated version, something better. And when we have better algorithms, then the authority will shift to them. This is already happening in at least a few fields of life, most clearly in the field of medicine. and decisions about your own body and your own health, I think it's not far-fetched to say that all of you who are now listening to this talk, including myself, the most important decisions about our bodies during our lifetime will not be taken by our feelings, they will be taken by external algorithms. Algorithms that understand our own internal systems and that have statistics about millions upon millions of other humans and therefore can make better predictions and better decisions about our bodies than just my own feelings. To give a concrete example, I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago that this very famous story came out with Angelina Jolie, that she had a double mastectomy. Why? Not because she discovered she had breast cancer. She didn't have breast cancer, but she went and did a genetic test of scanning her DNA, and it showed that she carries a mutation in one of her genes that, according to the statistical database, means she had an 87% chance of getting breast cancer. And she had a lot of breast cancer cases in her family. I think that her mother died in a relatively young age from breast cancer. Now, she did not have breast cancer at the time. Her feelings told her nothing, that she is sick, that she should do something, but the external algorithms told her, you have an 87% chance of getting this disease. So she had a double mastectomy, which is a very, very big decision to make in a person's life. And likewise, I think most of the big decisions we will make about our lives in our lifetime will actually be taken by such external algorithms, not based on our inner feelings. Now, when this will spread to more and more fields of life, liberalism will collapse, not necessarily violently, but it will simply become outdated. People will move authority to a different place. This has happened before in history, in the transition from the Middle Ages to the modern age. In the Middle Ages, at the time when the dominance was of theist religions, when people had faced a decision, a problem, the practical guideline they received was listen to scriptures, read what is written in scriptures, this will give you an answer. Now, the rise of liberalism was not a theoretical change. It was not just a matter of philosophy. It was a practical matter of how people actually make decisions in their daily lives. If previously, when they face a problem, say who to marry, they open scriptures and look for the answer. Now, with the rise of liberalism, the guidance was listen to your feelings. Go maybe at night, climb a high mountain, look at the moon, look at the sea, try to connect to yourself, see what you really feel, and go with your heart, go with your feelings. This was a practical guidance. It was not just theory. Now we move to the next stage, when people say, don't listen to your feelings, what do they know? Listen to Google or listen to Amazon or to Facebook or whatever, they understand how you feel better than you know how you feel, because they have much more information and they have much better algorithms than what natural selection gave you. They have information not only about your emails and your books and so forth, but the latest rage is that all these biometric devices that you wear on your body and that get constant stream of information about your blood pressure and your sugar levels and whatever, and of course do a DNA test and so forth and so forth. And if you have all this information and these superbly built algorithms, you can get much better answers than from your feelings, or certainly from the Bible. So we see the potential rise of a new kind of religion, a data religion. If previously God was in the center of events, and then humans were in the center of events, now data or information becomes the supreme source of authority and of meaning in the world. It starts with simple things, like you get an intersection in the road, to turn left or to turn right. Don't listen to your feelings, listen to Waze. It knows much better than your gut intuition whether to go this way or that way. Then you move to a more sophisticated level, what book to buy. I enter the Amazon website, I want to buy a new book. The first thing that happens is that a banner pops up and says, I know you. I know you, and I know that you and people like you will enjoy this book or that film. And the annoying thing is that they're often correct. They really know me better than I know myself. They can recommend the best book for me. So at present, it's still based on something quite, not very sophisticated, like they know the previous book that I've read and bought, and they try to make an extrapolation from that. But now we're moving to a far more sophisticated level when the books start to read me while I read them. If I read a book on Kindle or some other electronic device, the device can know whether I finished the book, how quickly I read it, when I stopped in reading the book, which parts I read quickly, and which parts I read slowly. This is a wealth of information which conveys a very good idea about my experience of reading the book. The next stage is to connect this to facial recognition programs, and the book will know not only when I read fast or slow, but when I laughed, when I cried, when I was bored. This is an immense device that can, of course, help Amazon not only recommend books, but do many other more sophisticated things. And eventually reach even questions like whom to marry. In the lives of most individuals, perhaps one of the most important questions is the question of who to marry. And now, instead of going to the priest and asking, Father, who should I marry? Or going to my parents, or trying to connect to my feelings and making bad decisions, I can ask Google, dear Google, who should I marry? And Google will answer, well, I know you from the moment you were born, at least something in the future. I've read every email you've ever written. I've listened to every phone call you've ever made. I remember every failed date you went to. If you want, I can show you the graphs of your sugar level and blood pressure during every date and every sexual encounter you had in your lifetime. And of course, I also know your potential mates, like if I have to choose between two people. So yes, I know him and I know him, or her and her, just as I know you. And based on all this information, and not only on all this information, but based on databases of millions and millions of successful and unsuccessful relationships, I can recommend to you at a probability of 87% that you had better go with A and not with B. And one more thing, I know you so well that I also know that you're disappointed by what I just tell you. I told you to choose A, but secretly you actually prefer B. And I also understand why you make this mistake. You give too much importance to physical appearances, to external beauty. Now, I'm not saying that beauty is not important. Beauty is very important, but to give it too much weight. In my calculations, which are based on these enormous statistical databases, I know that beauty counts for 9.62% of the success of a relationship. But your old-fashioned biochemical algorithms, because of things that happen in the African savannah, give this data, beauty, they give it 27.5%, which is far too high. So believe me, even though you feel that B is the right answer, go for A. And this is an empirical question. If enough people, enough time will consult and get a good answer that they will be happy with, then with time, more and more decisions about small things and about big things will be done in such a way. Authority will shift from the feelings, from the inner feelings of the individuals to the wisdom of these external algorithms. This is a very favorite topic in many science fiction movies and books and whatever. The usual plot of science fiction movies or books goes like this. Computers or robots become very powerful. Then there is a big war between humans and the robots or humans and the computers. And the computers are so powerful, they know everything, that they can do anything, but they don't understand the inner spirit of humanity. They don't understand love or whatever. And this is why humanity wins in the end. This is a very common plot in many of these movies because their audience is humans. So they have to sell this kind of fiction. Otherwise, people won't buy it, people won't like it. But there is a fallacy here. And the fallacy is that why do you think that computers or robots not understand the emotions, the feelings, love, whatever? It's not some otherworldly spiritual thing. It's, at least according to life sciences, it's an algorithm. So why think that a computer will not be able to understand an algorithm? Okay, it's a biochemical algorithm. It's not an electronic algorithm. But what's the difference? The mathematics is the same. The calculations are basically the same. What's the matter? How it is actually? Why does it matter how it is done? The second fallacy, which is part of it, is that most of these movies, not all of them, but most of them imagine it as a kind of war between humans and computers or humans and robots, when the far more likely scenario, which we are already seeing now, is not a war but a wedding. We are talking about a merger of the two kinds of algorithms, the biochemical and the electronic, not a struggle, not necessarily a struggle. Now, there is one question that still hovers over this entire discussion, and this is whether the life sciences are right. Does life really mean nothing more than information processing? It may seem like it when you read the latest articles and books and the discoveries of the life sciences, but there is still one big hole in the story, and this is the question of consciousness, of subjective experiences, what is called in philosophy the hard problem of consciousness. We now understand very well, we know how to find correlations between particular biochemical or electrochemical situations in the mind, or patterns in the brain, and certain subjective experiences. But we are very, very far from being able to understand how is it that a particular pattern of electrochemical signals in the brain creates a subjective experience of love or anger or hate or whatever. The life sciences are currently, most of them, have this dogma that, okay, we don't know how to explain it, but in 20 or 30 or 50 years, with more experiments, more knowledge, we will understand how electrochemical signals are transformed into subjective experiences. But at present, in 2015, this is just dogma. Still today, we don't have a clue how electrochemical patterns can turn into subjective experiences. Maybe the life sciences have got it wrong. Maybe humans and other animals are not reducible to algorithms. This is an open question. However, in historical terms, it's not as important as you might think, because a religion or an ideology does not have to be correct in what it says in order to take over the world. There have many cases previously in history when religions and ideologies, which said what we think today to be completely erroneous things about the world, nevertheless managed to take it over. In scientific terms, the story, for example, that Christianity tells about the world, how the world was created, how humans were created, how things work in the world, it's not true. It's simply not true, just according to science. But this did not prevent Christianity from taking over most of the world. So you don't need the truth to take over the world. Similarly with these new data religions, maybe they are based on a misunderstanding of life, but this will not necessarily prevent them from taking over the world. Thank you.
Hi. My question is a bit random, but you mentioned feminism and how we're now starting with feminism. But some of the other books I read talked about how actually way back when, like around the agricultural revolution, I guess, there was no patriarchy. It was equal society where everybody caught small animals and harvested stuff and whatever. So at what point in human history did it become uneven? When
did patriarchy arise?
Yes.
Well, the simplest, I have a thing. You hear me? Yeah. The simplest answer is that we don't know. One of the things I like most about science is that when we don't know something, we can simply say we don't know. We have very little idea how gender relations were prior to the agricultural revolution. After the agricultural revolution, when we have a mass of first archaeological and then written records, we know that they were patriarchal. Like you see even 10,000 years ago, you will find the remains of people from 10,000 years ago after the agricultural revolution. You see that in times of famine, they allowed the girls to die and kept the boys. The boys were fed, but you see in skeletons that girls suffer far more from malnutrition than boys in the same community. So this is a clear evidence of patriarchy shortly after the agricultural revolution. How did gender relations or family structures, how did they look like 20,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago? There are many theories, we have no firm evidence. Even if 50,000 years ago there was a matriarchal society or an egalitarian society, this is not the case in the last 10,000 years. So even if feminism, the feminist revolution, returns things to what they were like 50,000 years ago, in terms of the last 10,000 years, it's still probably the biggest social revolution that occurred. What is even more important to realize is that we not only don't know what was the situation 20,000 years ago, we don't have at present any good explanation for patriarchy. Many people think that the domination of society by men and the domination of women by men is obvious because men are physically stronger. The problem with this very common theory is that in human societies and even other ape societies, there is no direct correlation between physical strength and social power. In human society, for example, people in their 60s usually dominate people in their 20s, even though they're weaker physically. Or you look at organizations like the Catholic Church. So the Pope is not the strongest Catholic in the world, and he did not become Pope by going around beating all the other bishops and cardinals. You become Pope or you become president by building coalitions of supporters. Social skills are the key for social power among humans, and it's often argued that women have superior social skills. They are better in compromising, they are better in understanding how other people think, what other people want, whereas men are much more self-centered and have difficulty understanding or caring about what other people think and feel. So if this is true, we should have got matriarchal societies. And among our closest cousins in nature, the bonobo chimpanzees, we indeed find matriarchal societies. So how come in Homo sapiens, nevertheless, in most societies, in the last 10,000 years, women were dominated by men? We just don't know at present.
It could have been a survival strategy by the group.
Which?
if you had other groups, if you have more men, you were more likely to win over the other group.
No, it's not a question of numbers. Again, if the main thing is violence, then again, that's a situation in which men are expendable.
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying it might have been, right?
Okay.
So very dense material. Thank you for your presentation. I had a couple of comments. Maybe you want to expand on them, and then one question. So on the point that we don't know what's going to happen in the future with the jobs going away. So there are people thinking about that. Jeremy Rifkin, for example, he talks about the zero marginal cost economies, right? So which pose a problem for capitalism. So I mean, we have some ideas about that.
Yeah, there are people think about it. It's not the Islamic State which is leading the world thinking on the questions of the future of the job market. This is exactly the problem.
Right. The other thing that I noticed in your talk. So when you say communism/socialism, and then say, okay, this is an ideology or religion, think of it as an ideology and religion, and compare it to religions. I sort of disagree there because I think you can't really compare it with religions because they're based their belief system on irrationality, whereas socialism were more or less based on a belief system of rationality, and maybe that's the reason it collapsed so easily, so to speak, because in the end people were trained to think rationally about everything else. So, but let's move on. On the issue of what did the ask yourself a question: what did society, liberal society, did for us, and what did the church do for us? I could think of Gregor Mendel, right, and his genetics experiments, but I will go to something else, which is to say, did the United States invent the nuclear weapon? It didn't. It provided a framework. It provided the funding to do that. So the church provided the funding for the Sistine Chapel and for a lot of other things. So I think it's okay. We sort of glanced over it. But my biggest point in the presentation is I agree with liberalism as an ideology. I'm very liberal myself. I probably have 10% that I'm scratching my head over. But one thing that you sort of gloss over is the role of society, of social interaction between humans. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that it's only the question of go deep into yourself and think about what your decision will be. There's the tests for that are the famous railroad track experiment or the prisoners in the camp or whatnot. It's also about the bond between those people, and I think that would you agree that that has a factor anywhere? And then speaking of Google and data stuff, I work in privacy, so I'm going to fight from happening too soon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'll try to answer in quick succession to the different questions. Well, about social interaction, yes, when you look at how people actually make decisions, liberalism is wrong. We don't really go and connect ourselves and decide from there. The impact of society and culture is enormous. But again, as I said before, the thing with religion and ideology is they don't have to be true. When they tell us, connect to yourself, follow your heart, and make your decisions from there, and this is how we build our economy, our politics, it's not true. But in terms of ideology, this is what they are selling us, and this is what many of us believe, that we go to the supermarket and we buy whatever we want to buy. The fact that our brain was washed for hours and hours by commercials and so forth, liberalism discounts it. Liberalism says, no, within yourself there is an inner core of freedom, and nothing can really touch it, nothing can really change it. Now, we know it's not true, but this is by an ideology or religion. Now, I will also say a few words about why I call it a religion, and not just an ideology. It's really a question of semantics, of how you define things. Many people define religion as belief in God or supernatural powers. Nobody defines it as believing in irrationality. Religious people think they're very rational. They never say, I'm religious, I'm irrational. Many few of them do, but the vast majority of them don't think that religion is superstition or irrationality. Now, if you define religion as belief in gods, then yes, liberalism or communism, no, they're not religions, and certainly that of religion is not a religion. But this is a very narrow definition of religion. There have been religions in history in which gods played a very minor role, like Buddhism and Confucianism, and we still call them religion. For me, the basic definition of religion is in terms of the function it plays in history and society. Religion gives legitimacy to human laws and norms by hanging on to some superhuman power or law of entity. We come to people and we say, you have to behave like this. And they ask, why? So you don't answer because I said so, or because a couple of people invented this law and now you must obey. This won't work. You must go to some superhuman authority. Now, there are two kinds of superhuman authorities we find throughout history. One kind is gods. There are these superior beings with personalities. If you don't do this, they'll become angry, they'll punish you. But there is another option, which was common throughout history, and this is to turn to natural laws. The argument is, human laws, this is all society, were not invented by humans. They reflect the laws of nature. Therefore, they are not arbitrary, they are not random, and you can't change them. You have to follow them. So this is the case with Buddhism and Confucianism. This is the case also with communism or with Nazism. The Nazis come and say, look, it's not Hitler that invented this whole racial theory and this should be exterminated and so forth. This is the laws of nature. Natural selection, you've read Darwin, there are different biological groups, and so forth. Now we can say that the Nazis misunderstood Darwin and the theory of evolution. But in their eyes, the laws, like the Nuremberg laws, did not reflect some whim of Hitler and the party. It reflected the ultimate laws of nature. And if we don't follow these laws, we will disappear, like other species that have disappeared before us. So in this sense, I think that we can speak about these ideologies actually as religions because they fulfill the same function. They give legitimacy to human laws and norms. And the last question was about Gregor Mendel, that the church did contribute, say, to genetics, but it's not really the church. I'm not sure that the Pope was very happy if he knew what Gregor Mendel was up to or what would come out of it, which is not the same as the United States financing the Manhattan Project. They knew exactly where they were heading and they got it. So I think that there is a difference there.
So a few kind of questions / comments. One is, what is your take on? I know of at least a myth or fact of one society that was matriarchal in history, the Minoan, and I wonder if it actually does end up being supported by facts, historical facts. What are the reasons that this culture kind of vanished? That's one question, and the other one is with respect to science fiction. Not all science fiction is as you described. Specifically, as we're talking, I was thinking of Heinlein and Asimov, who exactly have the stories, like specifically talking about these exact things, and I wonder how you think they would incorporate in our future history, so to speak.
Okay, so about the Minoan culture, I'm not an expert. As far as I know, but you have to check it with experts. As far as I know, it was for a time believed that it was a matriarchal society, but no longer. Today, the archaeological and the deciphering of the writing system shows that it was probably as patriarchal as any other, maybe a little less, but it was still a patriarchal society. We have some genuine examples of matriarchal societies. For instance, I think there is a certain region in China, in the southwest of China, that there is a genuine matriarchal society there, but this is very, very rare. As the vast majority of societies and cultures known to science in the last 10,000 years were patriarchal. About science fiction, yeah, you're of course right. There are many different strands, and not all of them follow the basic script that I described. Like the Frankenstein script was the Frankenstein myth. But even in the case of the writings of Asimov, you do see, for me, that the most interesting tension and connection is between biology and computer science. Very often when people think about the ideas that they raised in the last part of the lecture, they give all the importance to the advances in computer science, to our ability to create better and better algorithms and computer programs. But in my eyes, the real revolution is actually from the life sciences. The really big revolution is when the life sciences are telling us that animals are basically biochemical algorithms. If they didn't tell us this, then you can have all the advances you want in computer science, it won't impinge on humanity. You will still have humans, which are something completely different. And all the advances in robotics and computers, okay, we'll have better computers, we'll have better robots, but it won't really make much of a difference to us. What becomes really amazing and really frightening is that once you realize that this is the contribution of the life sciences, that actually humans working in the same way, then you can make the connections. And this is the really frightening stuff. This is also why I think more and more companies like Google that started simply as in the computer business are moving more and more to the biotechnology business. And then the two industries are merging into one. The most fundamental idea in this respect comes from the life sciences, which says organisms are algorithms. This is the most important, I think, insight of our age. And also the most important question, because we don't have any proof of it. Currently, it's just dogma. We don't have any explanation of how any kind of algorithm can create subjective experiences. Indeed, in the field of computers, as far as I know, we're not even close to creating subjective experiences in computers. It's just a dogma that people say, yes, it's the same. To give another historical reference, back in the 19th century, when they tried to understand humans and the human mind and the human soul, or whatever you like to call it, one of the main theories was that humans were not algorithms, humans were steam engines. This is the basic metaphor that stands at the basis of Freudian psychology. Humans usually try to explain themselves in terms of the most sophisticated technology of the day. We are like this, because this is the most sophisticated things they know. In 1900, the most sophisticated machine, the most sophisticated technology, which was the basis for the whole economy, was the steam engine. So people come and say, the brain is like a steam engine. There are valves and there are pressures and so forth. So even today we say that when we want to unload our angst, like we pick up the telephone and we release some steam. The idea is that the human being is built like a steam engine. It has all these pressures inside, and if you block it here, it goes there. And much of Freudian psychology is built on this. So today, this sounds childish and silly. The human being is like a steam engine. We have a much better technology than a computer. So we say, humans are not like steam engines, they're like computers. But at present, at least, this is just a dogma. We don't have the hard facts to actually prove it.
This is sort of, I believe, a personal question, so you may skip if you don't want to answer. By reading your book, it appeared to me and one of my friends in India that you have absolutely no bias when I read your book. Is that really true? Do you have any attachments, any soft corner of any nation, religion? You may skip that.
It's a very big compliment. Maybe the highest compliment you can give a scientist is that he or she has no bias. I try to write the book with as little bias as I can. I think you can read between the lines. But there are some things I like more than others, some ideologies, religions, and so forth that I like more than others. But my aim, I think that my aim as a historian is above all to describe reality, not to judge it. It's very important afterwards to make judgments, to decide what is good, what is bad, where we should progress. But the most basic challenge is first of all to describe reality. And if you start with a certain agenda, then very quickly you become blind to much of reality. Because one thing almost certain about reality is that it's complex. You take any historical development, the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, you will always find some bad things and some good things and some neutral things about it. So if you start with the idea this is bad, you can't see at least half the story.
Thank you very much, Yuval. It was really, really...
So, there's this fantastic Wikipedia list called Wikipedia:"Unusual Articles." It's filled with unusual, unexpected, and unbelievable subjects. Every other week, I click on a new link and teach you a little bit more about our amazing world. You want to live forever? Well, if Wolverine or Deadpool taught you anything, you don't. But there's a theory on how you can. It's going to need a bit of explanation, so if you're like this guy and don't enjoy long-winded answers, I suggest you turn off the video now. Quantum mechanics. They're complicated. What we're going to talk about today is only a theory, because it's practically impossible to test. One of the bases of quantum mechanics is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Heisenberg says that, in quantum mechanics, the more precisely the position is determined, the less precisely the momentum is known in this instant, and vice versa. Let me explain. Imagine you're a blind man. In order to tell how far away an object is, you've developed a system in which you throw a tennis ball at an object, let's say a larger medicine ball. If your tennis ball bounces back in a short amount of time, you know that the medicine ball is close. If it bounces back in a longer amount of time, the medicine ball is farther. The problem is, however, that through observing where the medicine ball is, you've moved it, and it's therefore no longer in the position in which you observed it. In the subatomic world, it's essentially impossible to observe an object without affecting it. So all quantum theories must be based on and proven by thought experiments. Alright, that was my best attempt at summarizing a concept you can study for years in 30 seconds. If you want to learn more, you can click here for a Veritasium video on the subject. The first theory in our long-winded explanation is the many worlds theory. Let's say you're standing on top of a cliff. You're making the decision on whether or not to jump. According to the many worlds theory, the very moment that your decision is made, the universe splits into two. One copy being the timeline in which you jump off the cliff, the other being the one where you walk away. Of course, the you that jumped off the cliff doesn't know that the universe split into two, and in your reality, life just continues on as normal, while simultaneously in a different universe, a copy of you continues his life following his decision not to jump from the cliff. The many worlds theory says that every single time a decision is made by anyone or anything, the universe splits, and yourself inhabits only one of nearly infinite different universes. Now to quantum suicide. In this thought experiment, you, the experimenter, are standing in a box with a nuclear bomb that, if exploded, will immediately and unconditionally kill you. Hooked up to the bomb is a trigger that measures the spin value of a proton every 3 seconds. If the proton spins one way, there's just a click sound. The other way, the bomb explodes. Statistically, the proton should have a 50% chance of spinning one way or another, so the chance of the bomb going off or not is truly random. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. At this point, there's only a 12.5% chance that the bomb not going off was random. We'll keep going. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. If we fast forward 300 seconds after the proton has been measured 100 times, there's only an 800 octillionth of a % chance that your survival is random. We can now conclude beyond a reasonable doubt that you are immortal. What happened is that every time the proton was measured, every time the bomb could have gone off, the universe split into two, one being the scenario in which you die, the other being the one in which you live. But why didn't you go to the universe where the bomb went off? Why didn't you go to the one where you died? Well, it's quite simple. The version of you who died cannot know that he died. Only the version of you who lived can know that you lived. But the next time the bomb went off, the same situation occurred. Only the living version of you continues on in consciousness. On and on this will continue, forever, because the version of you who lives can continue to realize he's living. You can't die because only your living self will keep consciousness and existence. This, of course, brings up a lot of existential questions. Will the version of yourself who lives be the same person? Are the people around you in the new universe the same people? Shouldn't everyone be immortal from any sort of death in some universe? What does it mean to be a person if there are so many versions of you? There are certainly flaws to this theory, and there are certainly unanswerable questions. So should you go off and try quantum suicide in order to prove your own immortality? Well, I'd suggest not. This whole theory is based on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is only the second or third most popular interpretation. The Copenhagen theory, which you know from Schrödinger's cat, is the leading interpretation of quantum mechanics and will lead to you being properly and unconditionally dead. Thank you for watching. Make sure to click subscribe here if you enjoyed this video. You can check out my video from last week on what makes flying so expensive here. Please also follow me on Twitter at WendoverPro. A link is in the description.
Over the past 10 years, I've been researching the way people organize and visualize information. And I've noticed an interesting shift. For a long period of time, we believed in a natural ranking order in the world around us, also known as the great chain of being, or scala natura in Latin. A top-down structure that normally starts with God at the very top, followed by angels, noblemen, common people, animals, and so on. This idea was actually based on Aristotle's ontology, which classified all things known to man in a set of opposing categories like the ones you see behind me. But over time, interestingly enough, this concept adopted the branching schema of a tree in what became known as the Porphyrian tree, also considered to be the oldest tree of knowledge. The branching schema of the tree was in fact such a powerful metaphor for conveying information that it became over time an important communication tool to map a variety of systems of knowledge. We can see trees being used to map morality with its popular tree of virtues and tree of vices, as you can see here with these beautiful illustrations from medieval Europe. We can see trees being used to map consanguinity, the various blood ties between people. We can also see trees being used to map genealogy, perhaps the most famous archetype of the tree diagram. I think many of you in the audience have probably seen family trees. Many of you probably even have your own family trees drawn in such a way. We can see trees even mapping systems of law, the various decrees and rulings of kings and rulers. And finally, of course, also a very popular scientific metaphor, we can see trees being used to map all species known to man. And trees ultimately became such a powerful visual metaphor because in many ways they really embody this human desire for order, for balance, for unity, for symmetry. However, nowadays we're really facing new complex, intricate challenges that cannot be understood by simply employing a simple tree diagram. And the new metaphor is currently emerging, and it's currently replacing the tree in visualizing various systems of knowledge. It's really providing us with a new lens to understand the world around us. And this new metaphor is the metaphor of the network. And we can see this shift from trees into networks in many domains of knowledge. We can see this shift in the way we try to understand the brain. Well, before, we used to think of the brain as a modular, centralized organ where a given area was responsible for a set of actions and behaviors. The more we know about the brain, the more we think of it as a large music symphony played by hundreds and thousands of instruments. This is a beautiful snapshot created by the Blue Brain Project, where you can see 10,000 neurons and 30 million connections. And this is only mapping 10% of a mammalian neocortex. We can also see this shift in the way we try to conceive human knowledge. These are some remarkable trees of knowledge, or trees of science, by Spanish scholar Ramon Llull. And Llull was actually the precursor, the very first one, who created the metaphor of science as a tree, a metaphor we use every single day when we say biology is a branch of science, when we say genetics is a branch of science. But perhaps the most beautiful of all trees of knowledge, at least for me, was created for the French Encyclopedia by Diderot and D'Alembert in 1751. This was really the bastion of the French Enlightenment. And this gorgeous illustration was featured as a table of contents for the encyclopedia. And it actually illustrates, it maps out all domains of knowledge as separate branches of a tree. But knowledge is much more intricate than this. These are two maps of Wikipedia showing the interlinkage of articles related to history on the left and mathematics on the right. And I think by looking at these maps and the other ones that have been created on Wikipedia, arguably one of the largest rhizomatic structures ever created by man, we can really understand how human knowledge is much more intricate and interdependent, just like a network. We can also see this interesting shift in the way we map social ties between people. This is the typical organizational chart. I'm assuming many of you have seen a similar chart as well in your own corporations or others. It's a top-down structure that normally starts with the CEO at the very top, and where you can drill down all the way to the individual workman on the bottom. But humans sometimes are, well, actually, all humans are really unique in their own way. And sometimes we really don't play well under this really rigid structure. I think the internet is really changing this paradigm quite a lot. This is a fantastic map of online social collaboration between Perl developers. And Perl is a famous programming language. And here you can see how different programmers are actually exchanging files and working together on a given project. And here you can notice that this is a completely decentralized process. There's no leader in this organization. It's a network. We can also see this interesting shift when we look at terrorism. One of the main challenges of understanding terrorism nowadays is that we are dealing with decentralized, independent cells, where there's no leader leading the whole process. And here you can actually see how visualization is being used. The diagram that you see behind me is showing all the terrorists involved in the Madrid attack in 2004. And what they did here is that they actually segmented the network into 3 different years, represented by the vertical layers that you see behind me. And the blue lines tie together the people that were present in that network year after year. So even though there's no leader per se, these people are probably the most influential ones in that organization, the ones that know more about the past and the future plans and goals of this particular cell. We can also see the shift from trees into networks in the way we classify and organize species. The image on the right is the only illustration that Darwin included in the origin of species, which Darwin called the tree of life. There's actually a letter from Darwin to the publisher expanding on the importance of this particular diagram. It was critical for Darwin's theory in evolution. But recently, scientists discovered that overlaying this tree of life is a dense network of bacteria. And these bacteria is actually tying together species that were completely separated before. So what scientists are now calling not the tree of life, but the web of life, the network of life. And finally, we can really see this shift, again, when we look at ecosystems around our planet. No more do we have these simplified predator versus prey diagrams we have all learned at school. This is a much more accurate depiction of an ecosystem. This is a diagram created by Professor David Levine, mapping close to 100 species that interact with the codfish off the coast of Newfoundland in Canada. I think here we can really understand the intricate and interdependent nature of most ecosystems that are bound to our planet. But even though recent, this metaphor, the metaphor of the network, is really already adopting various shapes and forms. And it's almost becoming a growing visual taxonomy. It's almost becoming the syntax of a new language. And this is one aspect that truly fascinates me. And these are actually 15 different typologies I've been collecting over the time. And it really shows the immense visual diversity of this new metaphor. And here's an example. The first, on the very top band, you have radial convergence, a model, visualization model that has become really popular over the last 5 years. And the top left, the very first project, is a gene network, followed by a network of IP addresses, machines, servers, followed by a network of Facebook friends. You probably couldn't find more disparate topics, yet they are using the same metaphor, the same visual model to map the inherent complexities of its own subjects. And here are a few more examples of the many I've been collecting of this growing visual taxonomy of networks. But networks are not just a scientific metaphor. As designers, researchers, and scientists try to map a variety of complex systems, they are in many ways influencing traditional art fields like painting and sculpture, and influencing many different artists. And perhaps because networks have this huge aesthetical force to them, they're immensely gorgeous. They are really becoming a cultural meme and driving a new art movement, which I've called networkism. And we can see this influence in this movement in a variety of ways. This is just one of many examples where you can see this influence from science into art. The example on your left side is IP mapping, a computer-generated map of IP addresses against servers, machines. And on your right side, you have transient structures and unstable networks by Sharon Malloy, using all and animal on canvas. And here are a few more paintings by Sharon Malloy, some gorgeous, intricate paintings. And here's another example of that interesting cross-pollination between science and art. On your left side, you have Operation Smile. It is a computer-generated map of a social network. And on your right side, you have Phil 4 by Emma McNally, using only graphite on paper. Emma McNally is one of the main leaders of this movement, and she creates these striking imaginary landscapes where you can really notice the influence from traditional network visualization. But networkism doesn't happen only in 2 dimensions. This is perhaps one of my favorite projects of this new movement, and I think the title really says it all. It's called Galaxies Forming Along Filaments Like Droplets Along the Strands of a Spider's Web. And I just find this particular project being immensely powerful. It was created by Thomas Araceno, and he occupies these large spaces, creates these massive installations using only elastic ropes. As you actually navigate that space and bounce in one of those elastic ropes, the entire network kind of shifts, almost like a real organic network would. And here's yet another example of networkism taking to a whole different level. This was created by Japanese artist Shiharu Shiota in a piece called In Silence. And Shiota, like Thomas Araceno, fills these rooms with this dense network, this dense web of elastic ropes and black wool and thread, sometimes including objects, as you can see here, sometimes even including people in many of her installations. But networks are also not just a new trend, and it's too easy for us to dismiss it as such. Networks really embody notions of decentralization, of interconnectedness, of interdependence. And this new way of thinking is critical for us to solve many of the complex problems we are facing nowadays, from decoding the human brain to understanding the vast universe out there. On your left side, you have a snapshot of a neural network of a mouse, very similar to our own at this particular scale. And on your right side, you have Millennium Simulation. It was the largest and most realistic simulation of the growth of cosmic structure. It was able to recreate the history of 20 million galaxies in approximately 25 terabytes of output. And coincidentally or not, I just find this particular comparison between the smallest scale of knowledge, the brain, and the largest scale of knowledge, the universe itself, to be really, really quite striking and fascinating. Because as Bruce Mao once said, when everything is connected to everything else, for better or worse, everything matters. Thank you so much.